Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 52. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I am Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge on the CGS forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of you-know, floats like a butterfly, stings like a Sobek after a gentle nuzzle. Now pass him a mic because he's a podcasting machine, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
I've been doing a lot of comic quotes and all that. I figured I'd surprise you with a little something different.
Nice.
We would like to thank our sponsor for this episode, ComicHole.com. Whatever your collecting needs, ComicHole is your comic source. Shazam! The Monster Side of Evil has been collected into a gorgeous hardcover volume. I have this, and it collects not only the 4 amazing issues, but the jacket unfolds into an oversized poster that's actually made from the original covers of the 4 issues. Behind-the-scenes materials in here, commentary from Jeff Smith, an introduction by Alex Ross. This is an introduction to these characters. It contains a reimagined origin of Billy Batson, Mary Batson, the modernized Monster Side of Evil serial. Mr. Mind and Dr. Savannah make appearances in this book. This book has a great balance of humor, action, adventure, and superhero excitement. It's all ages material, but that doesn't mean it's watered down. When you are done with this volume, you're going to want to drape a towel over your shoulder and be a superhero yourself. Regularly $29.99, only $25.49 at ComicHole.com. I can't recommend this work by Jeff Smith more. It was just such an exciting story. It's a lot of fun. If you're interested at all in the Captain Marvel family and want to see some of the background stuff, this is a great leaping on point for these characters. They're also selling the 52 The Companion trade paperback. Regularly $19.99, only $16.99 at ComicHole.com. The superpowered stars of 52 are featured in this volume, collecting the best of their solar stories. Each of these stories are from issues such as Mysterious Suspense, Gotham Central, Animal Man, Detective Comics, Metal Men, Superman the Man of Steel, Strange Adventures, Rip Hunter the Time Master, Secret Origins, JSA Savage Times. This is a great collection of background stories for these characters. If you loved 52, and that was the first time you met some of those characters, this is a great way to see some of their background. Superman, The Bottled City of Kandor, trade paperback, regularly $14.99, only $12.75 at ComicHole.com. Don't miss this Silver Age collection of the best of the Kandor stories, in which Superman and Jimmy Olsen shrink down to battle as Kandor's own costume superheroes, Nightwing and Flamebird. This volume collects stories from Action Comics, Superman, and many, many more. Don't forget to check out their consignment service. Forget the hard work of selling via eBay. Let Comic Hole do the work for you. And they send you a check each month. Click on the Sell Your Comics link to find out more details. And as always, we want to thank Comic Hole for their continued sponsorship of the show. They've been some great partners to us, so definitely check out their website to see if they can meet your shopping needs. We are, as always, proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Thank you again for supporting us with Podcast Alley, Popcorn, and iTunes reviews, and so much more. Anything you do to help people to know about the show is a big help to us. We want to remind everyone to check in with RagingBullets.com. We have news on where the show is headed, updates on top bullets of the month, funny bullets by Squatch, Love and Capes the webcomic by Tom Zoller, bullet point sketches, reviews, columns, and so much more. Join us for your top bullets. Send in your top 5 best of the best comics to topbullets at googlemail.com, and David Wells will be kind enough to tabulate them for a special monthly segment. We all love to laugh, and show us your sense of humor by participating in Funny Bullets. Send them to funnybullets at gmail.com. Don't be afraid to send in your own favorite panels for a future offering. And I want to thank Jeff Greiner of the Tome Podcast for helping us every month by putting that fun segment together. Please feel free to send us in your listener rants, which is a special section on the forum. Shoot us an email or an audio comment. We're also looking for website content. If you want to participate in any way, contact us at ragingbullets@gmail.com. We love having you a part of the show. Jim, we actually have a Where's What Not Now.
Yes!
We got our first one. It's with you and George Bush. So if anyone wants to continue to participate in Where's What Not Now, by the time this episode airs, that section will be up on the website. We have our first one up.
Cool.
Please feel free to send those in. Put whatnot in strange places. So it's becoming one of my favorite sections on the website, and we only have one participant so far.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure we'll get more. As always, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in depth in the plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
This episode, Jim and I are doing a re-record of JLA number 11 and 12 with Art Lyon. And Art has been a longtime friend of the show, and I want to thank him ahead of time before we've even recorded this, just for taking the time to re-record this segment with us. JLA number 11, Art and Gene Ha did the fill-in issue for that one, and it was a very special, very unique issue. So I really felt our discussion, I'm so irritated, Jim and I both were, that we have to re-record this, because I really felt that our discussion was excellent. And I don't want that to get lost, so Art was kind enough to say, yeah, I'll come back on and we'll talk about this again. So thank you to Art ahead of time for giving us that, because I really feel like this is an important set of issues, and I'm glad that we're going to get to talk about it again. So we're going to jump right into that right now. Our next review is going to be the re-recording of Justice League of America number 11. The writer is Brad Meltzer, the artist is Gene Ha, the colorist is Art Lyon, the letterer is Rob Lay, the assistant editor is Adam Schlagman, and the editor is Eddie Berganza. And joining us once again for this second recording of this episode is friend of the show and colorist Art Lyon. And once again, Art, thank you very much for agreeing to re-record this. My hard drive crashed, for those of you that don't know this, and Art was like, you know what, I've had this type of thing happen before. Don't worry about it. I'll come on and re-record with you guys. But we do appreciate it, because this is, again, more of your time, and I appreciate you giving it to us.
I'm having deja vu, man.
Wait, I think we're going to be doing a lot of deja vu throughout this. So the real reason why I wanted to have you on for this episode is because JLA number 11, it was a one-off issue that was contained within the Brad Meltzer run, but a lot of the stuff from the beginning of the run paid off here, and it actually built off of this then into issue 12. It was a real important issue, though, because the artwork I thought was so important for the storytelling on this one, because it was really, you guys did a very unique approach to the styling for this one, so I think it was a great time to have you on to talk about some of the art background in this one, and what you guys, some of the challenges you had in doing this particular issue, because to me, it looked like a very challenging issue to do.
Yeah, it was. It was, it's a weird situation in which the entire issue takes place in one location, and I've never had to do that before. Because usually you can adjust the tempo with color by changing the dominant color in a scene or something, and I couldn't do that here.
Give us a little background on how you were approached about this issue. Like, what were you told in the beginning when they pitched this one, or you guys were told, like, hey, you guys are going to be on JLA number 11. How much did you know about what you were going to be doing with the art going into this project?
Well, I think I was contacted by Gene first, because I've done a lot of work with him. My understanding is that our editor, Eddie Berganza, or maybe Brad Meltzer, the writer, one or the other of them wanted Gene on this issue, or they wanted Gene on an issue of Brad's run, and they decided that this would be the best issue, which I think is a really good choice. I think that Gene was an excellent choice for this issue. I knew that Gene was working in this style, or at least was leaning in this direction again. We worked in a style that was kind of like this on Top 10 at the 489ers, the graphic novel, and also on issue number 12 of Global Frequency. And also, we did some illustrations recently, a while back now, but for a proposal that we submitted to DC, and it was in this style as well. So I knew what the art was going to be like. Of course, at that point, I hadn't read the script, and so I didn't know what the actual content of the story was. I just thought, ooh, Justice League, that means I get to do Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. It turns out no, but oh well.
But what an important run to be a part of, and how cool is that? I mean, this is a huge run, this 12-issue run. So you guys are part of something that's, you guys have already done landmark work, but now you're a part of what's considered to be a huge Justice League run, and what a nice footnote to have.
Yeah, well, they released the first, how many issues in hardback, right?
It was everything up to Lightning Saga. I've already seen now, it's funny, we had a different discussion about this last time around. I didn't know how they were going to do it. They are actually releasing Lightning Saga in its own collection after this. So I'm going to be curious to see how then they go to collect 11 and 12. Because they have to collect it in some capacity.
Yeah, I would hope. Last time, we were talking about, I forget the words they use for not omnibus.
We want an absolute Justice League number 11. And I would like to see that. No, because it really was. And as we talk about this, we'll talk about why the art. And I'm kidding about that. Jim and I both agreed we'd love to see the artwork on this in the oversized format because, and actually, I would say this whole run lends itself to being collected in a larger format because it's such a big story. Like Meltzer's stuff, you could bookend it and kind of put the whole thing together and have it like that. I don't see them going and taking one issue like that. I would like to see it. I would buy this one in a bigger format. Just because, you know what, there's stories where the artwork just looks beautiful, and it's just as important to the storytelling. But then there's ones like this where the feeling of claustrophobia that was generated by what you guys did on this one was very much a character, if that, or a mood setting, a tone for this story that I think was the visual storytelling in this was just as important as the dialogue and what was going on. Every so often it is artwork. There's certain artwork that makes me go, this is exactly why comics are a visual medium, and this is one of those issues that did that for me, and that's why I wouldn't mind seeing it blown up.
Yeah, well, if people are interested in that, they should write DC or something. I mean, I've got all the files at a high resolution of like a larger size, so that's a possibility. I think it would be really neat to see like 1 through 12 or 0 through 12 as an absolute or something. That would be pretty awesome.
It's a run that I think visually, everyone, it looked good all the way through. And I would like to see, that's the funny thing is that I've got that first hardcover. Zero's not in it.
Huh. Interesting.
It has, the last issue is that one, and I think it might have been 6. I don't remember exactly what issue number it was. It's the one with the team picture, the one that's the fold-out.
Yeah. That's number 5, I think.
Then you're right. It's number 5.
Yeah.
Wait, because 6, 7... because of Lightning Saga, I think 6, 7...
I've got it right here. Pulling them out of the bin. Yeah, number 6... No, 6... Be number 8, actually, is the beginning... No, is that right? 8's the beginning of Lightning Saga? Yeah, the number 7 is the one that has the fold-out. Yeah. Okay,
so the hardcover actually has all the way through 7, then. So it's 1 through 7 in the hardcover, because it does have that fold-out issue in there as well, which I was surprised. I didn't think they would do the fold-out in the hardcover, and they did.
That's impressive, yeah. That's neat.
I'm hoping that 11 and 12 get collected in some format. And that, you know what, I'll be honest with you, I didn't read the Lightning Saga solicitation, considering the sheer amount of issues that they put in the first batch, the 7 issues in there. Maybe they'll put Lightning Saga and those 2 issues in there, 11 and 12?
Yeah, because Lightning Saga is what? It's 8, 9, and 10, and then, I guess...
And the JSA stuff.
The JSA, actually, so 3 issues of that, right? Or is it 2 issues of that? 3 issues, I guess. Yeah, they could do that.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a far stretch from what they already did in this last hardcover. I'm hoping at 11 and 12. So I honestly don't know that they aren't doing that with that hardcover. I should actually check the solicitation, because your issue may be in that hardcover.
Yeah, I have to ask about that.
Let's find out. Because if it's in there and it's your issue for anybody who hasn't picked it up, that's the only reason why I'd like to do it, because I'd like to be able to tell people, hey, go pick this up if you didn't read this issue.
It says 8 through 12.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wait, okay, it says 2 of DC's most prominent super teams joined forces in this stunning hardcover volume collecting Justice League of America numbers 0 and 8 through 12.
Oh, nice. So 0's going to be in there.
Yeah, and Justice Society of America numbers 5 and 6.
Okay, so there's only 2 issues of Justice Society. That's going to be nice. So you can get this whole run in, because I've got the first hardcover, so I'm going to grab the second one.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So you'll be in the hardcover. That's why I wanted to make sure we listed that if that was in there, because then we can at least say, if you missed this Justice League run and you haven't read this work, go get it.
Yeah, go get it. Buy. That's cool. I'm glad we looked that up. I had no idea.
Right, let's just jump right into the issue, because right from the beginning we see these dialogue balloons that are all faint, and they show that our main characters, Red Arrow and Vixen, are underground, and they're just they're just in a very dark area. And we slowly start seeing the mood set from that whole scenario. So it was actually completely black for a while there for the poor characters.
Yeah, the first 2 panels.
I did like the faint dialogue balloons, because that made me wonder why can't we see them? And I started to realize it's because we can't hear clearly what's being said by the, I guess what you would say, the supporting cast of the people that they saved.
Right.
And it was really cool because we turn to the next page and it sets up a really creepy mood. Because Roy is worried about like the shards of glass in his neck. And it was funny, visually you couldn't quite tell what his situation was yet. But I was still thinking to myself, imagine feeling glass in your neck. And what's worse about that is any time you turn your head or move at all, depending on where it is, you're cutting into yourself. Because glass isn't just going to stay stationary.
It's a very tender area. There's some very important arteries in there.
Yeah, that was some cool stuff, seeing how Roy was like fighting shock and just, he was trying to continue on. That is a serious problem with injuries, that, your physical injury may not be so extreme, but if you can actually will yourself to die. If you just let it go into shock and you start panicking and you start freaking out, the next thing you know, things escalate. And you just see him sitting there. It's like, okay, calm down. Watch your breathing. Remember your training. Think about Ollie. Think about everything he had to live for and everything that was waiting out there for him.
Well, and his injuries are pretty bad, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. That was part of the human drama of this particular issue, was as you were going through it, as his focus, or as the lighting came up. See, to me, it's funny how art is something that you can interpret as you're going through. Because I remember from our previous discussion, when I was reading this, I saw the changing in the lighting to be his eyes adjusting. But you actually explain. Why don't you go ahead and explain what you guys were going for with the changing in the lighting? Because coloring wise, the lighting mood changed there.
Well, it's in the script, actually, that the first two panels on the first page are black. And I think it's just to introduce the idea there's no light down there. Now, I guess it's possible. I'm trying to remember. I don't have the script up right now. I can open it up. But I guess it is possible that there's a little bit of light down there, although I can't imagine where it would be coming from. But the conceit is that there's no light down there, and they can't see anything, and we can see it just because there's magic movie lighting going on.
And even you can argue that buildings sometimes have emergency lighting that runs off of batteries or something. So and that's very limited lighting anyway. That stuff kicks on. So, I mean, even if we're going and stretching to that, you can argue that might be what's going on down there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to some degree that's open to interpretation. I mean, I don't think that's set in stone.
It did, that whole situation put me in there with Roy, though, because as the lighting started coming up, you start seeing a little bit more. And the first panel, it's not quite clear what's going on with his hand, but I'm like, is something sticking up in his hand? And because I kept looking at him, and you kept seeing different abrasions and all kinds of things going on with him. But I liked that we weren't really clear early on what his actual injuries were. It was kind of hazy. And as the light source came up further, it's like, wait a minute, that is sticking through his hand. So he's not only trying to deal with the emotional shock of where they're at, he's dealing with these injuries that he's starting to focus on and see. And a lot of times when you're in a shocking situation, you don't quite realize what your own injuries are until you start to gather your thoughts. And that was cool.
Yeah, and this essentially starts right after this building has collapsed on them, and he's kind of snapping out of the initial impact, of the initial shock of it, and he's orienting himself.
I've always been attracted to visual mediums, just because this was my launching pad into it. Then that led to obviously a love for sci-fi, a love for video games and computer animation, and just various forms, whether it's hand-drawn, computer, whatever, all the way through. But light sourcing is always in every one of those mediums. Light sourcing and choosing when to use lighting it's a very important and a very tricky area. So I can imagine for you on this one, this had to have been a challenge as far as deciding when to use light, how to keep that light consistent all the way through so it never looked like it was getting too bright in some panels and too faded in others, so it still felt like the same location. How hard was that for you to keep that consistency all the way through?
Well, a lot of it was in Gene's art initially, but at the same time, I did a lot of lightening some areas and darkening areas. Actually, I darkened a lot of Gene's artwork just because, as I looked at it on my screen, I realized this isn't dark enough. It's just not dark enough. I was trying to make it as dark as I could without just making people angry. Because it all takes place in this really small, confined space, there are some things you can do to create a sense of space and a sense of depth, and you really have to define that space really, really well, because everything happens there and you can't screw it up, basically. And so, yeah, I used a lot of reflected light because there's huge slabs of concrete right up against them, and I use the phrase reflected light loosely because there is no light really, but we're assuming, we're sort of making a artistic leap here.
It is something you see in movies a lot, though.
Yeah.
In film where you make that same leap of faith that there's something that's a light source in there. Even if it's very faint, if it's somewhere there's something that may have been still connected in some capacity. But I would say easily in a building that collapses, it's reasonable to expect there would be some form of emergency lighting that runs off of a battery that might be connected.
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen Escape from Alcatraz?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a scene where he's escaping from Alcatraz, and the way that they film that sequence, there's lots of scenes where there's no light at all, and you just hear movement, and you see like a little bit of a highlight, or a light that's really far away, or a glint in the eye of the characters. I didn't want to go that far, because that, of course, would be really annoying, but I wanted to go sort of halfway between that and a scene in, I don't know, like a Star Trek episode where they're in a cave and the floor's flat, and there's lots of light.
And trying to find a happy medium where you're still setting the mood and the tone
Right.
that it's hard to see.
Right.
Roy's panic initially. You got to remember, Roy's got a lot of history to him. Being Speedy, being Green Arrow's sidekick, he's got every bit as much history as, I'm trying to think of, I guess you would say like a Dick Grayson and things like that. As far as chronologically, you would say that they were around for very similar amounts of time. He definitely, in his dialogue in here, he looks up to Dick Grayson as being someone who's been around a little bit longer. But as far as compared to Vixen, who he's down there with, clearly the longevity's on his side. He is the veteran in this situation. And it was a great chance for this character to be shown, even though he's panicking, the way he collects himself, the way he focuses and gets himself back into the game, especially as we see how damaged he is, was amazing.
Yeah, I give him a little leeway on the initial panic he had, considering a building just got dropped on his head. So, you're allowed just a little bit of wee panicking.
A little bit.
The building drops into the Potomac. And as the building drops into the Potomac, it was nice because we got to see the outdoors, which throws us back into a little bit of a contrast. You're talking about the light sourcing that you had on the inside, but when you see how bright it is outside, then you jump back in on the inside, it's nice because that's set, for me, as a reader, that sets some contrast to the fact that where they're at right now is a very different situation, and this enclosed surrounding is a third character almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting way to describe it. The environment, that sort of hole that they're stuck in, is sort of a character too. It's good writing, that flashback, that one panel where we see the building crashing into the river. It's a good trick to use as a writer, just to throw in, and like you say, that contrast.
And to see, like, again, he had this thing going through his hand. His hands are probably his most important tools. You need to have your hand functioning in order to do anything with a bow and arrow. So for Red Arrow to now not have one of his major appendages working at 100%, even if he could do something at this point, he's a lot more limited than he normally would. You got to think it's going to affect his aim or whatever, if there's any capacity of doing anything. But this also put them underwater.
Yeah. I want to see if as readers you noticed something I did, because I'm not sure if I was being too subtle or not. On page, I guess it's page 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 4, the page where he pulls his hand off the rebar.
I got it.
In that last panel, I put a blur on his hand.
Oh, yeah, I can see it.
And I did that. I was just, I don't know if it's, maybe it's not obvious, and that's why I'm asking, to see if I'm being too subtle. But I was trying to indicate that after he pulls his hand off that rebar, his hand has like a spasm or a twitch.
I definitely took it as, I saw that the hand was now off it, and you can actually see, one of the things that also struck me on that panel was the look on his face. The eyes are like closed almost. Mm-hmm. It seemed like every move this guy made seemed to be a problem for him.
Yeah.
And you can tell from his injuries too, like, because you see a glass shard actually in that same panel, a glass shard in what would be his right shoulder. I almost said his left shoulder, which from his perspective it's his right shoulder.
Right. Yeah.
My left is right. But I guess, were you going for there, like, that because of the fact that it was in pain, that he had to shake in his hand?
Well, just that he had a piece of rebar through his hand, it just occurred to me, he might have a muscle spasm there or something.
Oh, sure. You mean like a shake or something that we all get?
Yeah.
I gotta be totally honest with you, that's one of those things that, it's one of the reasons why I like going back and rereading my comics multiple times, because I love little details like that. I will admit I didn't catch that, like the first couple times through. It's something that you're like pointing out to me now, but it is one of the things, it's one of those things that I notice like in multiple read-throughs, and it makes it worth going back and rereading a comic book again when you guys take the time to put in those little details, because I think there's so much going on in that picture with him that it's very easy to, every time you read it, to put your focus somewhere else. Because he's got a lot of damage just in that panel alone. Plus, you've got the dialogue on what's going on with him. Mm-hmm. That it's a great panel to go back through, and it actually adds a lot of weight to the idea that you really should give your comics more than one read through. It's more than just dialogue. It's more than just the initial art. There's so many things going on in there that you're really going to miss if you just do a surface level read. Did you notice? What did you notice it, or what did you catch? No, I didn't. I did not catch that.
Okay.
You know, that's a cool thing to know now, but I'm an idiot sometimes when it comes to.
No, it's interesting to me as an artist to know like what gets noticed and what doesn't, and if it's the kind of thing that gets noticed on a second or third read. That's useful to me as an artist. So
to me, it's the small details like that add the realism, and it's stuff that you don't on the surface realize when you're initially looking at it, but then when you go through a few times, you're like, that scene looked more realistic to me because there were things that my eye was catching that didn't stand out to me at first. So that is something that didn't stand out to me at first. It is something that on one of my read-throughs I would have caught. But details like that, being honest from a reader's standpoint, at least, and wait, this is just my experience. There's other people that are probably like, how could you there's people banging their heads against their iPods right now going, how did you not notice that the first time through? But
don't hit your iPod.
Yeah, but for me, those are the little details of things that, and they're the reason why now I do read books multiple times. Just from doing the show, I realize that I'm missing a whole bunch if I don't.
It was interesting, on this project, I had a lot of opportunities to use special effects, and it's an issue, I think, where the coloring, at least hopefully, really made a difference. And I had a lot of opportunities to use little blurs and just like little special effects which aren't necessarily really obvious, but which were satisfying for me. And that's an example of that, of the blur on his hand is a case where it's not in the script, and it's not in the art, but as I was working on that page, I thought, I should add something here. I don't know what, and then I worked it out. And on the first panel, on that same page, is another example of that. I mentioned this last time. The first panel where he's screaming there. Mm-hmm. Initially, I was just going to have that panel all red, like no skin tones, no color of the concrete slab on his back. Just make the whole thing red, and like really bright red, as a way to express his pain. Then it occurred to me that approach was too artsy, and I realized that this story didn't need an artsy approach. It needed grit and pain and that kind of thing. And that's when I had the idea to have the spray of blood, which struck me as something I could do to enhance it, I guess.
To me, what stood out on those particular, and on that particular panel and the one below it, was things like the glass shards and the abrasions as he was shifting. When you see the blood spray, it added more impact to me that I'm like, okay, we're seeing spraying blood here. We're seeing these abrasions all over his face and neck, and we're seeing the glass shards shifting. In every panel, the glass shards have shifted in some capacity. Even if it's only slightly, just because of a camera change or whatever, you can still see that they've slightly adjusted, they're in slightly a different spot, which it was a very small little thing. But to keep seeing those glass shards have a very, I'm glad those were a very different color than everything else, because they stand out in every single panel. And for me, I've caught a broken glass before.
Yeah.
So I know just from catching a broken glass, the damage that glass can do on one quick little sweep. Imagining the amount of glass that he's got
in him from what we can see. It was just one of those things to me. I'm like, this is a lot more threatening, a lot more scary, because they're all in places he can't see.
Right. It's an example of the kind of detail that Gene puts into his art, because in the whole story, on each page you have to keep track of where each little piece of glass is, and he had to do that in every page in which you can see his neck or his arm there.
And it was funny, even when you go down to the shot of the hand, where it's just a shot of the hand, you see a glass shard in his thumb. It's like,
right.
Wasn't bad enough he's got this thing sticking through the hand, but you see that. So your coloring choices were really good there, because throughout the whole thing, I think his abrasions and his wounds and everything stood out a little bit more because of the choices you made.
Well, yeah, I tried to make the pieces of glass stand out, and from a realistic standpoint, they probably wouldn't stand out that much, but then we're talking about a situation where there's no light down there anyway, so I figured, I'll just make them stand out.
As we get through the next couple of pages into the segment with the Potomac, and then they're obviously could be drowning at this point. This is where he starts talking to Mari. They start talking about the dampness, but my favorite thing was the page after that where he says, "Tell me where you are," and you see the two of them. They're so close, yet they aren't aware of it. And from the enclosed space, I could so totally imagine that, because there would be echoes and there would be... Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I tell you, it was funny. It was at this panel right here where we can actually see how close they are, but he couldn't see her. That's when it dawned on me that it's just like pitch black down there. And it was one of those things where I actually smacked myself in the forehead going, "Oh, you idiot, of course it's completely, dark down there." And that just took a whole new meaning on this for me. And you start seeing like some of the background stuff where it's a dark colored and everything was all blackish, but you could still see the outlines of some of the concrete slabs, some of the cross beams and the rebarb and whatnot. That was just really, really cool around these smaller art panels. Instead of just having open blank page, it had even the background was part of the storytelling, was part of just the tone setting for this whole issue.
Well, that's Brad's work. That's in the script. He does a really good job in this issue, and in all issues does a good job of, I'm not sure how to describe it, of pacing things visually, I think.
Now, as a colorist, when you get that script and you take a look at that, what kind of challenges does that present to you when you see a certain mood or a tone set by a writer? Like in this one, I'm assuming there were certain panels where you had to start making decisions, say, okay, he wants this kind of mood set in here, so coloring-wise, I need to make some choices. I don't know if this is the best issue to talk about it, but in general, just as a colorist, how often do you face situations where you're like, okay, this is a challenge? You want me to convey what kind of mood here?
I think that this issue was the most extreme example of that, again, because it all takes place in this one space and you have to make everything count. Usually in an issue you have like multiple scenes, multiple sequences, and you can change the color schemes and the brightness and stuff. And here I couldn't, and so I was just doing everything I could to take what was in Brad's script and what Gene had in his art and just to try to turn it up even higher. Make it more grueling and more gritty. But yeah, I tried to pay attention to that kind of thing in any script, to figure out what the mood is and then decide, okay, what kind of a color do I need to have dominating this scene? In the case of this, and also the thing I just finished up on Red Rain, I used a lot of red in that issue.
Yeah, we should talk about that, because that's something, the work that you've been working on this weekend has been Red Rain. You're actually doing, and is that part of the Search for Ray Palmer? Yeah,
the complete title is Countdown Presents The Search for Ray Palmer, Red Rain.
Okay, yeah. And that's an issue that takes place completely in the phenomenal Batman Red Rain universe, and that's one. Yeah. And you're doing colors on Kelly Jones's work, is that correct?
It's him and actually a couple other artists. I'm not sure what the story is behind that, but yeah, okay. He did about a quarter of the issue, 5 pages or 6 pages of the art.
That's going to be an interesting one to see.
Some real cool stuff.
I'm a big fan of the Red Rain universe, so to hear that there's going to be, in fact, a brand new Red Rain story, in a one-shot format where we can kind of see, and actually, I think it's interesting to see our characters whoever is in the issue reacting to the Red Rain universe, because it's a very different, hugely different universe than ours.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of some of the characters who are traveling through these universes in that group, because one of them is Jason Todd, the Red Hood, or whatever he's calling himself now.
It's funny now, they really refer to him as Jason.
Yeah.
They've been in Countdown and all that. I can't remember the last time he was referred to as anything other than Jason Todd.
Yeah, that's how he's referred to in the Red Rain script, at least, anyway. I would imagine that he would have a pretty interesting reaction to Batman who's a vampire.
Well, and we've seen him actually, he's met up with a few different Batmen at this stage between Countdown and leading up to Red Rain. We've seen him meet from a very evil Owlman.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm behind on all that, so I haven't read that stuff yet.
Okay, yeah. So we'll just leave it very general and say that he's met up with different versions of a Batman-like archetype in these different worlds, and to have him react to that, I find that really interesting. Yeah. Especially considering his current status quo with the character.
Well, and interestingly, I mean, I haven't read, like I just said, I haven't read any of those issues yet, and I haven't read the scripts or anything, obviously, but it's my understanding that there are events in each of these universes which have ramifications which carry on through the characters into the next universe, kind of.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So part of the overall continuing story.
Yeah, there's an event, I can't say this 100%, it's not blatant in the script, but my understanding is that there's something that happens in this issue to one of the characters which has implications in whatever the issue and universe it is that they wind up after this one.
Definitely a big issue in the whole Search for Ray Palmer saga, so people should make sure they check out Red Rain.
Oh yeah,
to kind of see some of the big events that are building from it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't compare it to any of the other issues, but it's a part of the whole thing.
And see, to me, I'm on board for that one just because of that original Doug Munch, Kelly Jones Red Rain was outstanding. So to be able to just delve into that universe again, that's going to be a fun one. That had been interesting work for you to work on too, because it's a little, again, outside of some stuff that you've done previously. It's kind of a different sort of flavor for some things you've done previously.
Yes, it is. Yeah, very. I've never worked on anything like Kelly Jones's art. I used a lot of red, like I said. Comparing it with this issue of Justice League, in a way, in that the whole issue has a mood, and I tried as much as I could to use color to convey that mood. Our
listeners, if they haven't been reading some of the stuff you've been working on, they can have an Art Lyon month. Sure. Get the Red Rain issue, get the hardcover of this, both of which honestly, being a fan of Red Rain, and I know they're collecting. They've got a multiverse trade that's coming out that actually is going to collect the Red Rain story.
Oh,
so for people that never read it before, if you missed that, you can go now and pick that up. They are recollecting that, and they're branding it Stories of the Multiverse, I believe, is what they're branding it. But Red Rain, it's Batman Red Rain. So they can actually read the stories that led up to the one-shot that you are involved in. And I recommend that because it's a fun little world to take a peek at, because it's wow, is it a different one from ours.
Well, and it's an example of how smart a move it was to bring back this multiverse and include Elseworlds in that multiverse. Just from a marketing standpoint, you get to re-release all that stuff again, and it makes it all relevant now.
And I think there's a whole new audience out there that maybe's jumped on board from things like Meltzer's Identity Crisis, who maybe are exploring DC from Infinite Crisis, who maybe never had a chance to read some of those Elseworlds books. Elseworlds were awesome. It really was a chance for DC to place their characters in very different eras and tell different origins with their characters, while still at the same time putting in elements that tied them to the characters that we know. And it's definitely worth exploring again and taking a look at them. I'm hoping we do get more Elseworlds stories now that the multiverse is back. And we are starting to see them. I mean, you're involved with one. Red Rain you're telling an Elseworlds story. The only difference in this case is now our heroes are reacting to it.
Yeah, I hope that they do more Elseworlds. I mean, I've got my favorites too, and also just on a purely selfish standpoint, Gene and I and that friend of ours submitted an Elseworlds proposal a couple of years ago, and this was like right before all the Crisis stuff started to happen, and either they weren't interested because it wasn't any good, or because they didn't want to do any Elseworlds yet. I don't know.
I might be leaping here. I'm more inclined to believe the issue right now is they wanted to wait to do anything Elseworlds related because they were waiting for the big reveal at the end of 52, and then to do this with Elseworlds right now. Because they haven't released any Elseworlds in a long, long time. I'm talking about new Elseworlds. And I think it was basically, let's wait until we do this, then bam, we can do some fun things. I'm wondering if that's something that's going to happen after this countdown to Final Crisis. Like, we're going to start seeing more Elseworlds jump in again after this.
I hope so. That would be just great. I mean, there are a lot of Elseworlds which, haven't not yet been incorporated into what we know yet about the multiverse. And I mean, I would love, of course, to do an Elseworlds. This specifically the one that we propose. I think it has some neat ideas in it, and I don't want to say anything about it, but
no, and I'm not trying to get that. One of the things, just to encourage that though, from the way Didio explained it, we aren't just limited to the 52 worlds that they've talked about, because each of those worlds have alternate dimensions.
Crap.
So, yeah. Well, no, I mean, to me, and it's funny. We were just talking about this on Comic Timing with Freddie Williams. We were on there, and it was something that it came up because he was it's funny, a lot of creators are sharing similar thoughts to yours in the sense that you've got, he was saying that he's got his own story that he wants to tell too, and the same thing, he wasn't telling us what it was, but just saying, I've got this, because you don't want, I totally understand where that's coming from, but I'm saying there's a passion out there to be able to tell certain stories. And I think what's going to happen now with there being multiple dimensions, things like that, this is where you guys as creators are going to have opportunities when they flesh this out to then tell your stories. I'm hoping, from a fan standpoint, I'm hoping that's what we get. Because Elseworlds, when it started, was such a darn cool concept. And if you think about it, stories, I mean, we still all talk about Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come was an Elseworlds story that I think is one of the reasons why we're seeing Elseworlds come into continuity.
Yeah, because it had such an impact and has affected the interpretations a lot of writers have had of a lot of characters.
Well, and like Gotham by Gaslight, they're going back. I mean, that's another one. It's a little bit more obscure, but a great story. It led to a sequel, but that's part of that. Oh, what's the storyline, Jim? I'm forgetting it right now. The one where they're voting. It's the one in December. There's a December event where basically we get to vote on 3 different Batman.
Oh, right.
Everyone's vying to be a part of Monarch's army.
Arena or something?
Yes, that's it. Countdown Arena. Thank you. Arena. There's 3 different Supermen, 3 different Batman, 3 different Wonder Woman from the Elseworlds, and 3 different Green Lanterns.
Yes,
including the Bruce Wayne. Yeah,
I love it. It's so geeky, and yet it's just wonderful.
Wait, I went right away and voted. Like, they went through there,
awesome.
and I'm like, I can't wait, because DC, I don't know if you still can vote at this stage, but DCComics.com, and I'm assuming you can, you get to vote on which one you want.
Okay, I'm going there right now. Let's see. I'm going there to vote right now. Arena. I'm already on the DC site because I wanted to look at something here. Arena. Let's see. Countdown Arena number 1. Let's see. Well, here's the solicitation, but I don't see...
Voting?
Yeah, voting. I mean, it may be over. Who knows, but...
Because it's a December release, so I'm wondering if they had to know by now?
Probably. I mean, it's October. Usually they try to do these things. I mean, it's certainly written by now, I would imagine. So.
Yeah, so maybe they had to do it a little bit earlier.
Darn it.
Yeah. It's a cool... But either way, it's a cool concept.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious to see who wins.
Yeah, me too. What the heck? It's such a... The Elseworlds idea is... It's such a fertile ground for creators. I mean, you get to take the basic idea behind the character or the traits that make the character who they are and then break some rules and see what happens. you know.
Yeah, and it's such a cool way to break the rules because you don't have the continuity baggage then. It's funny for me when you put an Elseworlds brand on there, you could do anything. It doesn't bother me. I'd get anal about the geekiest little things when it's set in continuity because I'm like, you can't do that. That with this character. And especially when we're talking like the Trinity. I tend to be more forgiving with other characters, but I'm very picky with the Trinity, especially Batman, which I never realized how picky I am. But I've, especially with conversations that Jim and I have had about All-Star Batman, I'm a lot pickier about this than I thought. But you can put an Elseworlds brand on it and do pretty much so anything. And I'm okay with it because I'm like, it's a completely different universe. The background's a little bit different. Have some fun. And it's funny how psychologically, even as a reader, it affects me. Where then I want to see a creator like dabble, do a little fun with this.
And it's probably more accessible in some ways for a casual reader to grab an Elseworlds.
You know, you're right because again, it's a story that's usually they're written to be contained.
Right.
So they give you everything that you need to know in them. So, the background information, even if it's little origin tidbits, nobody else has read anything else from it. So what you got in your hand is...
Is it?
I wonder how many people, when the Elseworlds were out there, actually that was their first DC comic.
Boy, that'd be interesting to hear about. You should have a thread.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially you would imagine, like, I keep referring to Kingdom Come, but I would imagine Kingdom Come. But let's talk about, Red Rain. I would imagine a fan of vampire stories. That might be one where they go, okay, I saw some Batman films, but this Red Rain sounds really interesting, a vampire Batman. Because I'm assuming on the back of the trade it's got a blurb about it being a vampire story and all that. And the artwork certainly lends to it being something a little more goth, a little more gothic. Right. And so I can imagine maybe there's some fans who maybe read previously vampire... Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I can remember when Red Rain first came out. Because it was when I was in college, I was collecting some DC, and I wasn't really too heavy in comics, and I saw the cover, and right on the cover you could tell right away that he's a vampire. And because I'm a vampire freak, I picked that thing up immediately. And the funny story is I grabbed the last copy at the local shop that I was at. And I grabbed it like 10 seconds before my one friend, who is a die-hard DC fan, could get his hands on it. So I just beat him out. And he's just like, you took the last copy. And I'm like, well, yeah.
Yes, I did.
And you can't have it. Did you give it to him?
No. But hold on. Before people start thinking I'm a meanie, I did tell him that...
Wait, I don't think you're a meanie. I'm like, amen. But go ahead.
But I told him, on my deathbed, it's willed to him that he will get that copy of Red Rain.
Do you actually have this written somewhere?
No. Well, a couple of years after that, I ran into another copy of it, so I bought it to him and I gave it to him for his birthday. And it was funny, because as soon as he opened it up, he goes, Jim, what are you trying to tell me?
Oh, well, what's funny here is, I guess my first question was going to be, were you there when it was given to him? Because he might think you were dead.
I was there.
He's a vampire now.
Yeah, there you go. We got way off on a tangent on it. But it was basically spinning off of, once again, check out Art's work on the Countdown Search for Ray Palmer special, Red Rain, because that is a story. Obviously, it's something that is, if you are an Elseworlds fan and you haven't read Red Rain, you need to jump on that, because it's a cool little universe. But let's go ahead and get back to our situation with Mari and with Roy, because basically when we left off and we were talking about it, we were talking about Roy at this point is starting to get it back together. And my personal belief is, when I was reading this, that Vixen being there is like the last thing that helped him pull it together, because it's no longer him underground. He's got somebody else to think about. And being a seasoned hero that he is, this is the time where, okay, I got to step up. I got to focus on her. We have an opportunity to get out here, and I can't let her die.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that that's what brings him back, that's what helps him to focus, is that he has somebody he has to help. Although I can't remember, I have to read through the issue again. He's also thinking about his daughter, of course. I can't remember when that enters in to the script.
I picked up on that too, where there's like more than one thing that's going on with him. I liked the fact though that when he started focusing on her, I started thinking about something like, this is a hero. You're looking at somebody else's life, and this is when they start to step up. And even with his daughter, you get that same feel, because like a hero, Dad needs to get back to his girl, because Mom is not necessarily the only role model you want for this daughter. Cheshire's is the mom. I mean, it's...
Or Hawk Girl, maybe.
Well, now there's nothing wrong with leaving her with Hawk Girl. It's, that would be perfectly fine, and actually would fix some things for Hawk Girl as well, who has her own set of issues in that department. So,
but the last thing you want is Uncle Carter stopping by. Come on,
that would be the greatest thing in the world. Uncle Carter would be the cool uncle. I want an Uncle Carter with a mace.
He'd fly you around town,
Wait, how cool would that be? Every day I would have Uncle Carter take me to work.
Take you to school.
Here comes Mr. Whalen again. Wait, talk about classroom management. Now, boys and girls, if you're talking in class, Uncle Carter's going to come in and have a talk with you.
And he tends to speak with his mace.
And it's usually he starts with the good ones. I can't play this
Dude,
at work.
you are sick,
I can't
man.
play this at work.
And you're sick, and that's coming from me. So that's a real statement.
Great.
Yeah,
a picture of Uncle Carter on the wall.
I really want to. I really need to work on a Hawkman story now, just to make you happy.
That would be awesome.
I have to find
a Batman story works too, though. So okay. I'm all right with that. Batman's what brought me to the dance. So when you said I'm geeking out at you working on Red Rain, the vampire end of it, too. Yeah.
Has there been a Batman and Hawkman Brave and the Bold yet?
No, but there needs to be.
There needs to be, and I'll color it.
Honestly, I think they need to start up a whole new Brave and the Bold with Hawkman and a whole bunch of people. Because everyone wants to team with him anyway.
I think that we need a Hawkman Elseworlds, I think.
That would be a character that would lend very well to an Elseworlds.
Yes, yeah. In a way, it's hard in the sense that he's not as well-known a character, like, again, to casual reader. Most of the Elseworlds are Superman or Batman stuff.
Right. Maybe like a Justice League one, or a and they've done that. They've done like Liberty Files and stuff like that, where they started to delve into the Elseworlds.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that one called The Nail.
Yeah, so that's where I think you can do characters like that a lot better in team-ups. And I agree with you. There's certain characters that are a little bit more obscure for the general fan population that you probably don't want to do for Elseworlds on their own as a solo. Unless that Elseworlds takes off, and then you might want to do side stories from it.
Or unless it's Hawkman.
Yeah, you know what? For him not to be a part of the Big Four is really a gross tragedy.
There's no justice.
Okay, now one of the things that really struck me about this issue is...
Jim, what are you doing? Getting back on the topic?
We're saving the listeners is what I am doing.
We're still talking about Art's work. We're talking about Art's future Hawkman Elseworld story.
That's right.
That we're doing.
Hawkman and Batman.
This is what he pitched.
Sorry, folks, I'm tapping out.
Hawkman and Batman meet in a bar, and...
The funny part is, Mari's now in a panic state. And that's where... a tipping building would throw off your sense of gravity and where it should properly be. What I really liked about this was, at first I'm thinking to myself, okay, the building tipped over, that's why she's not sure, she feels like she's still falling and all that. What we find out later on what's really going on here was so doggone cool. And that was nice, because there were multiple things that were set up in this issue that you almost have to go back and reread it to say, oh, yeah, how cool is that? And that's what's really neat about this issue. So I would encourage anybody, if you only read this through once, go back and reread it and see some of the setup pieces that were occurring in this issue that you might not have realized until later on, because it really reads well when you do that.
Or go buy another copy and read it again.
By the hardcover.
Yeah.
Right, there you go.
So I love the little bit where he tells her to close her eyes and the coal miner's reference. It's
Right.
really a well-written moment because he's connecting to the real-world situation to try and help her solve her problem. Clearly, they both are going to need each other to get out of this mess, and he needs her focused. He's like, I can't be the only one here who's sharp. I need her back. And that's part of him trying, I think, to hold it together. Like, I need you here as my person to connect with, to hang on to, as, holding me into reality. I'm like sitting here putting my hand out, like this is a visual podcast. I'm talking with my hands.
I really liked how you shaded her throughout this whole sequence. It's obviously, she's got a darker skin color than Roy, but it still has that same reddish type tint to it. Part of it's from blood, part of it's just from the stress and just the emotion, the raw emotion on her face and whatnot. That was something that really was like, wow, that is kind of cool, especially when you look at some of the scenes where it goes right from Roy to her. You can really see a sharp contrast, but you can still see an overall general jive going through.
It's interesting. I had to go through the whole issue and I had to do a quick recoloring of her skin tone throughout the whole issue, because at the end I got an email from Eddie Berganza, my editor, and he said, you have to make her darker. And I thought, he's crazy. I made her dark, and I looked through it and I said, nah, she's fine. I said, are you sure? And he emailed me back and said, yes, I'm sure. Please change it. and then I went through and basically made her skin tone darker. After I looked at it, I realized, yeah, their skin tones are too close together. I had to make hers darker. And I don't know who I think I am asking my editor if he's sure.
Funny, when you were talking about skin tones, Jim, the other thing I was looking at throughout this whole thing, in both characters, but her especially, it stands out for me, costume tones. Like, it depending on the positioning of the character and where they're facing with regards to the light sourcing you were using, you see that there's very different tones throughout the outfit. Can you tell, as a colorist, how do you keep that kind of balance of color throughout an outfit? Because it's not just one color tone. You're talking about all the way through her outfit. She's got multiple different color tones going on. So it's not just a standard of hey, I played with her skin. The skin's got different shading. That's enough for the reader. You did it in the costume too. And how do how long does it take to do something like that? What are some of the challenges on toning the skin color, the costume? How do you do that to achieve that all the way through?
How long does it take? Too long. Although I can't complain on this issue. I actually had a lot of lead time on this issue. I got the script in March. I started working on it end of April, and it was due in, the issue came out in June or July. So basically I had a month and a half or 2 months to color this issue because I was impressed that Brad had the scripts written all the way through, because I got the script when issue number 6 was coming out, and he had the script done for 10 and 11 and 12. I was impressed by that, but it does take some time. But I decided to make the main light be like a white light, even though it's an imaginary light. But I just decided that white would be a nice, relatively stark light. I didn't want a light that was warm because I was already using a lot of red, and I didn't want to make it look cold because near the end I make it look cold. And so I didn't want to use those blues earlier on. And so I made that main light source white. In terms of reflected light, if her skin is up against the slab of concrete, like her right shoulder or arm, what I would do is I would sample the color of that slab of concrete and make it a little darker, and not necessarily make it darker, but and just use that color in a brush and just lay a little bit of that on top of the color of her skin, which I had already laid in, or at least the part of her skin which is facing that slab. And then if her skin is right up against her costume, for instance, with her collar, then I would sample the color of her skin, which I had already colored, and brush that color in where her skin is close to the costume. That's essentially, I guess, how that's done.
When you're talking about your white light sourcing, you know what else? Windows. The building has windows. So when it tipped into the water, realistically, even though it was underwater, depending on how much of the building was underwater and where the location was, there's still going to be light coming down from the sun, because we already know from the establishing shot that there was sunlight outside.
Right.
That light could be shining through the water, even if it's only, little bits that are poking through. Even though the area where they're in might not be windows, a crack in a portion of the enclosed area could bring through some light through the windows. It all depends on, so that's just another possibility out there on where lighting could come from.
Well, I just, yeah.
And not that it's funny, because of the fact that we don't have to know for where they're at,
right.
It's not really important. I'm just kind of, as a fan, kind of going through, I'm like, well, where could it be coming from? And I'm like, it's one of those geeky little things where I'm sorting through in my head. I'm like, well, yeah, that light could come from emergency lights. They could come from sunlight. It's funny how you don't need to tell us that. We as fans, there's certain things that as fans, when you read a story, you can justify yourself, whether or not it even needs to be justified, because realistically, you guys needed a light source in there in order to tell your story. So it had to be there for the visual storytelling part. We can, as fans, justify ourselves, and I'm sure there's listeners out there right now who are like, well, no, Sean, it was this, it was that, it could have been this. And they're the ones that are like, it just doesn't matter. To me, it does, I guess. I like justifying things, even when they don't need to be.
It's a thought process I have to go through. And like I said, I knew it couldn't be a warm light or a cold light because there was enough red already, and I wanted to use the cold later on. So yeah, I just went with white because it was easier. It was, sort of the obvious choice.
I did like, though, it's funny, when we see her lying down and in the various different panels here, and you see the crack, where you obviously see that she's hurt a lot more than even she realized at that point, because she screams, and you can tell that she's got some more injuries. I appreciated from the different panels that you can see depending on where she is as far as with regards to the light source, the shading gets darker or lighter on her face, on her costume, on her surroundings, because you see it's more depending on where we're looking at, where you see how much of the actual enclosed space is surrounding her. We get to see that. So I appreciate the amount of care that went into that, because it really was something that in this story meant a lot to me.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, this is an issue where I did a lot of that, especially, again, because of the enclosed space. Like, everything has reflected, every object, the characters, their skin, their costumes, the walls and stuff, everything's right up against everything else. So I had to use a lot of reflected light on things. It just made sense.
As this story continues, we find out that these characters are buried under lead. And, the metal and the lead are messing with communicators. That takes Superman completely out of the mix with the X-ray vision. This whole issue was filled with a desperate intensity. When we see characters at their most vulnerable is when we get to know who they are. And no fake facades here. They're real people in intense situations, and I love this. And it was one of the things that as this was building through, we start to learn a little bit more about Roy, who he is, why he belongs on the Justice League. Because this issue really hammered home to me. This guy belongs. This is a veteran now. He didn't fall apart in the situation when he had every right to. I would have been squealing like a pig in this whole situation. I mean, they would have heard me. The fake people that you could see in the beginning who could barely hear, they would have heard me. They might not have found me, but they would have heard me.
I hear someone screaming.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure where they are. It might be from a building 2 blocks away. But I hear something. In his case, the fact that he pulls it together in this situation and starts thinking of her and talking to her and trying to work out, like, what is our status quo? Where are you at? How bad are you hurt? What can you do right now for us so we can get out of here? What can I do to help accomplish? You needed to see that from him. It really did. I'm like, this guy belongs there. I see why he was chosen and why everyone was so happy he was there. And that was neat. We also find out about her changing powers in this, though. It's a very slow build to that, but I like this because it goes all the way back to stuff that happens earlier in Meltzer's run. And when you were talking about how early you got the script for this, I was like, it was funny as a reader, seeing the connecting threads between the issues as this goes on. I'm not surprised. because you can see that there was a plan all along for events in the earlier issues to lead to events here and then into issue 12. And it was a story that was being told all the way through. And how cool is that to see that, hey, it's so cool that I was reading from issue 1 because the events in that first arc are paying off here. And that's fun.
Yeah, you know, I when I read the first couple issues of Brad's run, I guess I read number 0, number 1, and number 2. I kind of dropped it at that point just because, I don't know, I think I was thrown off by his writing style. He does this thing where he switches between scenes frequently. Of course, and interestingly enough, in this issue, there's just one scene. He switches between scenes, you know, even on just one page. He'll switch between scenes. And they also do this thing with the like multicolored narration blocks and all that. And plus, I didn't like watching Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman sitting around choosing who was going to be in the League. But then when I was going to work on this, I went back and I reread those, and I read the issues up to this, and I was really struck by how good it all works if you read the whole thing.
I like how the whole concept of the League in this run was an organic process. Like how they originally, you know, did the whole thing. We're the Trinity, we're going to pick, because we're the ones that dissolved the League, now we're going to rebuild the League. And I like how they kind of had to take a back seat to the League that made its own decision. The League that formed around them. And I'm convinced not one of the people that are necessarily on this League were the ones that they chose. And I love that. I love that with this whole thing.
Yeah, and interestingly, in issue number 12, there's a couple more Justice League core characters who are also taking a backseat.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, and we'll talk about that. It's interesting to see their reactions to this whole event as well, because it's really kind of like, it almost like those two that are taking a backseat have a better understanding of the League than even the Trinity do.
Yeah.
I take it back. I think the Trinity understands now because they were kind of slapped in the face, and they liked it.
Yeah. It's. I like that they recognized that they kind of deserved it.
Yeah, because wait, you're looking at me, Jim, like I'm nuts here. No, I'm serious, because they were. All of a sudden, they made all these plans. They spent all this time where they laid out this whole thing, addressing exactly what Art's saying, and then all of a sudden they were, you know, it was like, bam, guess what, guys? None of that matters, because the League's here now, and they aren't the people you chose. The situation decided who the League was.
So you're saying the Trinity's into S&M and all that kind of stuff. They get smacked around and they liked it.
Yeah, you know what? A little bit. They might, you know, just casually.
I have nothing to say.
They wear leather outfits.
That's true.
Wonder Woman does like to tie people up. So
there you
yeah,
go.
sure,
See?
sure.
And they always talk.
Oh God!
I wasn't going there with this, but I'll take it there if you want.
Okay. Become an R-rated podcast.
Yeah, exactly. All right. One of the cool things is when we're talking about Vixen's totem, Roy's trying to find these connecting threads with her to kind of keep. I found it twofold. It was kind of to keep himself focused, but at the same time to keep her focused by finding that common ground. And talks about the picture of her mom, to get her talking about something else besides the bleeding and the hopelessness of this situation. He talks about the picture of his daughter within the quiver. And it was one of those cool little moments where he pulls that out. I've got a picture of my daughter in here. It's a little human aspect of a character. You want to think that quiver means something to him, and that he wears that in every mission, and there's something in it that's a little bit of home. And I like that. It makes him more human. It's somebody like, you can hang with Roy. You can hang with Vixen. They're real people with real issues that make them a little bit more accessible.
And you know, interestingly, you were talking about the quiver and that he has a picture of his daughter in there. He also mentions that it's the quiver that kept him from having his back broken.
Yeah, ideally. It's funny that it was his power set that kept him, or not his power set, but I mean, you know, his particular modus operandi that saved him in this case, in a way that you wouldn't expect.
Right, yeah.
It's funny, though, that he doesn't want to pull out the picture because that means that he's saying goodbye to his daughter.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want, and he's like, I'm trying to do everything within my power to keep from doing that because that means I've given up. And I liked that. That was like I don't want to quit. I can't quit. This is not what I do. We keep going. We find a way out of this mess, and we're going to do it together.
The more we talk about this, the more I would really like to see Brad write more comics. Because, like I said, after reading a bunch of the issues back to back, he does this like moving back and forth from scene to scene really rapidly. But over the course of multiple issues, it really has this interesting flow. And like you said, it all builds. You had 12 issues of, I don't know what to call it, build-up, I guess, in his run.
I love the changing tones that you used throughout this, though, because the mood got lighter and darker repeatedly throughout this particular segment. Mm-hmm. And then we get this little scratching part with Mari, and it was something that, to me, when you see that little scritch, 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 it started dawning on me that she doesn't have her claws. And that was something that kind of stood out for me when I was thinking about her. I'm like, she doesn't have her claws, and she's doing this anyway just to keep the secret. And it's funny how all these, it's so important for her to feel like she belongs. I mean, this is the Justice League. This is the top-tier team. She's made it. And granted, she was on the Detroit League, but, hasn't been on the JLA in a long time. She's back again, and now all of a sudden this is her opportunity, and her powers aren't working the way that they're supposed to.
Well, and the incarnation of the Justice League that she was on is a lot of times thought of as not a top-tier team. And she's got a lot to prove. Or at least she feels like she has a lot to prove.
And it is her chance. It's her chance to shine again. And how cool would that be in the superhero universe to be on the Justice League? I totally was buying into what she was doing.
Yeah.
She asked Roy for an arrow and explaining that the enclosed space makes this necessary. And don't pass her the tip. And that was another cool shading moment, because when he passed her the tip, I'm like sitting here watching the shadow, and because it was such a dark space, this is where really, your coloring and shading and what you guys did with the art there was so necessary, because I needed to see that tip was actually going into her hand. And that's where, like, the shadow on her hand and the shading there so paid off for me, because it's like, she screams, yeah! I mean, if you poke me with a little needle, or I get a paper cut, I'm screaming. You start poking me with an arrow, we got a problem.
Yeah, and you have to figure his arrows are really sharp.
Oh, this is the guy he's a superhero who's there because this is something he does on a level that is so far beyond what we would expect from anybody else. So he is there because this is an expert at archery. And so you're right. Forget any other concept of bow and arrows that you have. These are of a completely different level. I love, though, that he was smart enough to think of giving her two, and that he gives her that glue arrow, which totally leads to this really cool moment because she starts digging and water's coming out everywhere. And he's like, "What did you do? What did you do?" And you see that there's that whole blur effect. And that was really, really cool because it showed panic. It showed an intense situation. Water splashing in everywhere. And you see both of their faces like rushing around in panic. He's like telling her to clog it. And that's where her arrow comes in. But like that blur effect, Art, what goes into making that particular, because we talked about it earlier with the hand, but you see it really here in a very panicked situation, and this is one where it was so essential for me as a reader to see that, because it set to me the whole mood of, oh my God, we got water coming in, what's going on, this is unexpected.
It's just what I do is I take the final art after I've done all the coloring on it and flatten it, and I make a copy of it, and then basically I what I do, I reduced the saturation on it, actually making it kind of grayish rather than the skin tones or the reds or whatever. And also I make it transparent to some degree, and then just kind of move it around until it looks right, and then I sort of erase out areas which are in the way of seeing the details of the main image. In the case of her face, I moved it around and I placed it, and then I erased the areas in that semi-transparent overlay which were obscuring, her mouth and her eyes or that kind of thing.
This is why you're working sometimes till 4 in the morning, isn't it?
Yeah, yes it is. Yes it is. And there's, a lot of that in this issue. So, yeah.
But then the end result is, you've got to be very proud when you see the end result and you start looking at some of these panels and the way that they all eventually came together and say, okay, it was worth that extra time to put that in, to make that little mood, to make that effect. Is that in, Art, is that in the script, or is that something you get from Gene, or is that something that you choose to do based on the situation? Where does that decision come from to do a blur effect like that?
Well, in the script, there are multiple points where the script describes how the building around them is shifting or settling. And that's where I did a lot of the blurs. And also, you'll notice that all the panels that have blurs also have a blurry border. And that was, I guess that's what I was trying to represent there. I'm surprised that there's not like a rumble sound effect in those panels, but maybe that wasn't...
Oh, because of the rumbling of the water rushing in?
Well, the rumbling of just the building settling and shifting, as it sinks or whatever. That's the idea. I think it's referred to once or twice early on. One of them freaks out about the vibration. It happens for the first time on page... there's a crick, Mari, and then Mari, answer me. I can't remember where it's mentioned, but anyway, that's why I did that, of the blurs and the blurry borders. In terms of the water spraying, and I used a blur on that just because it was important to make it look like water is moving really fast, because it's just spurting through that tiny hole.
And it totally fit for me, the whole the intensity of that situation, because that was something they clearly did not expect. And that's where, and it's funny, that situation was so important to my enjoyment, to what we actually find out is happening later with these characters, that it's one of those panels that, there's ones that stick out to me. I'm like, this is another foreshadowing to what's really going on here. And when you go, at the end, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense now. That's one of those panels that was a tone setter for me and made that whole payoff when we start finding out at the end where they're really at. It was cool. It was just, the little details like that really added to this particular issue for me.
Thanks. Well, it's like a microscopic example in this issue of what Brad did in all 12 issues of foreshadowing things and weaving a bunch of elements through his whole run. That's at the macroscopic scale, his whole run. At microscopic level, it's this issue and these little hints of what's coming, or clues as to what's really going on.
As this continues on, we see her seal the thing up with the arrow, and then they go back to talking again. And Roy is still basing a lot of his being calm and a lot of his hope on the fact that she could turn into a fish. And, or I should say, not turn into a fish, tap into the powers of a fish and use that to get them out of here. And I like it because we never see her truly calm down in all this, and this is the reason why, because she almost goes back to defend herself, where she's like, to swim through that, the way the building tumbled, we have no idea what's up there. She's talking about, these different things all the way through, but it's really just to kind of mask that my powers aren't working the way you'd expect. And it really leads to this, set of panels where she finally, and it's actually my favorite Mari panel that you guys did. We see that shot of her where she's got that very serious look on her face. I haven't had my animal powers since our fight with Amazo 2 months ago. And on that one, there is so much going on with the detail of her face. It's an important close-up because you see it's kind of almost like a blank stare, where, it's kind of like a realization all right, I give up. I got to tell you, because this is important to where we're at right now. All right, but what I really appreciated here was just the amount of detail that was put into the whole art on this one, the drawing, the coloring, the sheer amount of numbers of colors on this particular panel alone was breathtaking, because you really had a lot of different tones all the way through here. I can't imagine, this had to have taken quite a while to do. And how many times do you go back through and look at certain panels before you're satisfied? Does that happen at some point?
As much as I can. I try to go back over things as much as I can. On this, again, I had a fair amount of leeway. I had more time than usual, and so I was able to go back over things and change things. And I ran a lot of stuff past Gene and Brad and Eddie and Adam, the editor and the assistant editor. And, in the close-up, you have to pay more attention, a close-up on person, you have to pay more attention to skin tones. Because, if you look at your own skin, there's not just one color. There's blues and there's greens and there's yellows and there's, purples. Just try to incorporate that.
You mentioned that your wife, when we had our previous discussion, that your wife
Yes.
is a big source of help too. You want to share what your wife does and a little bit of that background? Because I thought it was kind of cool last time when you mentioned that she is a resource you sometimes pull off of.
Yeah, now I use her more and more. Early on, when I was working with Gene, I relied on him and, also, of course, on my own artistic weirdness. But my wife is an oil painter on the side. She's got a 9-to-5 job at a frame store, a custom framing store, but she's also an oil painter, and she sells paintings on a pretty regular basis. And a lot of times now, increasingly, I just have her come in and say, okay, I'm starting on this page, here's the mood, here's the script, here's my notes on the script, what should I do, basically? Or if I'm halfway through a page, or if I think I'm done with a page, I'll have her look at it and say, is there anything wrong here? Am I off on this? What do I need to do? Or if I've worked on a page and I'm tired of staring at it, a lot of times I'll get to a point on a page where I've worked on it and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing now. Because I've just, because I've been staring at it for too long. And that's a good point to have her come in and say, okay, does this look good? Am I screwing up? What's going on?
With the lead time on this now, I know that you have different deadlines on different books because
Yes.
you don't always have this kind of lead time. You mentioned that you were able to send it to the editor, send it to Gene. Are you always able to do that, or is it one of those things where there's just sometimes you're like, out of frustration, you're like, I got to just get this done, and I'm going to have to make my best judgment and hopefully get it to one person and maybe get a little input, but we just got to get going with this. Does that happen a lot too, or is it like a mixture, or how does that happen?
Yeah, well, on this Red Rain issue, I colored the issue in under 2 weeks, which is really hard. I'm not a fast colorist. I'm not, tragically slow, but I'm not. There are plenty of guys who are faster than me. I've worked on monthly series before, so it's not that I can't do that, but it's in the case of this Red Rain issue, like I said, I did it in under 2 weeks, and so I emailed a lot of, after I was done with the page. There's not much point in sending an email with a page to my editors until it's done, or at least until I think it's done. But I will send it to Gene or have Ellen look at it, and other people I know, other colorists, to get their opinions. In the case of the Red Rain, I had Gene look at a couple of pages, even though he wasn't doing the art on it. I had some other colorists look at it, and I had Ellen look at it. And after I got a few responses, and after I finished the first few pages and sent them to the editors on that, which are also Eddie and Adam, the same as on this issue of Justice League. And everybody seemed happy with it, and so I was like, okay, I'm not screwing up, I'm doing something right, I can go now and really do it. And that usually happens every time I start on a new project. The first few pages I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But and then I get responses and I go, okay, all right, I'm heading down the right road.
Well, it becomes kind of a template then, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
After you've got a few pages in, you're like, okay, is this what you want from me on this particular title? Is this the mood, the tone, the coloring? Is this how you want the characters in the background to look? Then once you've got that kind of establishing baseline,
yeah,
you can go with that because then you know what your color sets you're working with and things like that. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, and for whatever reason, it seems like every project I work on is really different, and so every project I have to go through this process where the first few pages I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and it's a little hard on my ego. But then I build up steam, and I get some compliments. My wife looks at it and goes, okay, yeah, do this and do that, and I'm like, okay, I get the idea now. And then I feel better, and then I can attack it, kind of.
That's got to be the fun part of working on different projects, though, because it kind of expands your repertoire. Where you can kind of say, now, I've worked on this type of book. I've done this kind of book. And it just kind of adds a little bit more to your resume, so to speak, where you can say, hey, I've done this, 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 and this. You can really put me on this type of book because, now you've done something goth in Red Rain. So it just adds a little extra something, I don't know, to your...
Yeah, that's true. I like, on the one hand, a challenge like that, to change styles is hard, obviously, because you have to figure out how to do it, how you want it to look. But at the same time, it's really rewarding because you learn a bunch of stuff. I learn stuff on every project and sometimes on every page. So yeah, it's rewarding work. It's hard, but it's rewarding.
Well, then your own work becomes reference for future projects.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, yeah. What you mean in terms of my own work or other people's work, or?
I'm saying like you can say now that you've done, like, for example, let's take this Justice League issue. Now that you've done something like this with Gene, when you guys work on a future project with with similar tones or with a similar art styling to it, you can say, I can pull off of some of the things I did in Justice League number 11 for this project because you've done something like this. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Am I?
Yeah.
I mean, you probably have opportunities to do that, but then there's other panels probably in that same issue you'll hit where that's where some of the new challenges come in too.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, this next page with the flashbacks to previous issues is an example of that, where I had to really shift gears, and I spent way too long on this page. Kind of a long story why, but it was an example of trying to figure out how to make each of these flashbacks, how to make each of them distinctive without, it's a mainstream superhero title, and so you want to see the people's costumes and their costume colors, and so you can't do a lot of color shifting, especially since you only see Geoforce in like one panel, you only see Batman in one panel, you see the Flash in a couple panels, and if it was up to me on my own, if it was like my own project, I would probably just have done each of those panels in like one color, just to distinguish them. I might have gone that route. And on this, I just spent way too much time trying to distinguish these things, and Gene had done the illustrations as a bunch of separate images, and I made the mistake of coloring the images separately first and then bringing them into the page. And that was a big mistake because you can't keep track, if you're doing them as individual images, you can't keep track of how they look as a whole on the page. And that's
and maintain like a flow?
Yeah.
Because they do have a nice flow.
Okay, well, thanks.
How they turned out. No, I mean, they turned out to have a really nice... Because it was really important, because we were finding out through this journey, as she was going through her storytelling, that she was leeching from all these characters. Right. And it really is it's a segment you want to kind of follow along her journey, and it really does have a very nice flow when you go all the way through.
Okay, good.
And you can actually connect to the J, because it's funny, the J ones, they appear multiple times, but they're not necessarily in sequence with what happened. Like she goes to the Amazo part, then she goes into the training with Roy, then she jumps over to the two panels with Jay, but then we go from that we go back to the training again, and back to Amazo I should say first, back to the training, and then back to Jay, and the Jay panels all seem like they go together.
Okay.
They feel like they're part of the same sequence. Like basically from different angles, not even different angles, same angle, but they're different. Like the camera distances seem to be a little bit different from each one, because of how much we see of Jay. And it really was an important segment though, because this was a big reveal. Because going back through, we saw that she was in a situation where she had to connect with, she lost herself in with the birds, and she had to connect with the human animal. With the human animal, and that was what drew her back in. That was what made her again the person. But that had an after effect. That had a side effect with her that she hasn't been able to stop pulling from people since then. And it just made me wonder: is this permanent? And it brought me into their own fears in this situation, because it's like, okay, what does this mean now? And we find out for her what it means now, because the last set of powers that she absorbed were black lightnings, which are useless right now because it'll kill them. So, you don't want to fire off lightning in water.
How inconvenient.
Yeah. Roy hasn't given up yet, though. You know, she shows herself as this true hero because she has no ideas if her powers are going to kick in or what powers are going to kick in. But his theory is that in desperation, she's going to connect with the fish and swim out. She wants to leave Roy there so that she doesn't risk both of them. But I like that because it shows right here. This is a hero. She's willing to die to try and get them both out. And that's what she's willing to do at this point. I don't know that I would do that. And I want to say, and I'm not trying to make myself sound bad, but realistically, you don't know what you're going to do in that type of situation. Yeah. This is an intense situation. So I'm looking at it realistically as a person to say, I'm human. I don't know how I'd react. I want to say that if a friend of mine was in there, somebody I care about, or a colleague or whatever, on whatever level, I would step up at that point like Roy did. You want to believe that about yourself. And that's what's great about heroes. They show the ideal. Even though these are very human heroes where you see strengths and weaknesses and secrets and realities about these characters, in the end, they all have qualities you want to aspire to. And in this case, both of them knuckle up in their own way. And it's when they do that that you sit there and say, this is who I would hope I would be. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, but I hope it.
It's an example of how this story is very identifiable. Because you have two people who are superheroes, but have no superpowers right now. I mean, or at least effectively have none.
Roy's bow and arrow isn't going to do them much good at all other than sealing up holes and letting them out.
Yeah, that glue arrow is pretty handy.
Yeah, wait, never make fun of the trick arrows again. I guess the question is, in this situation, what do you think you would do? Would you leave the person behind? Would you want to go together? Would you stay there and hope somebody rescues you? I don't know what I would do, especially after the water came bursting through. That's the part where, for me, that's where my gray area comes in. I could see myself definitely getting as far as they did, where I would dig out. The second the water starts coming through and I plug it up, unless something drastically changes, I don't know that I'm trying to get through there because there's too much unknown. What would you do? What do you guys think you would do? What do you think you would do? I mean,
well, depends. Who am I stranded there with? Now, if it was you, I'd be like, "See you, Arch. I'm swimming for. Don't worry, I'll send safety."
So but I mean, would you go and swim through there and try to get out?
Jiminy.
I'd like to think that I would do what Mary did with give me the rope arrow. I'll see what I can do, what I can come up with, and I would I would trust that I'm a good swimmer. I'm a strong swimmer. I can hold my breath pretty well and all that, and I try to do that. But if you think back to like the Poseidon adventure, what happened to that old lady who swam underneath because she was like trained swimmer? What happened to her in the end? I have a feeling that's what would happen to me, because, it's...
Well, what's amazing to me is that she swims out there and comes back. I mean...
Yeah, that was the whole crazy thing, too, yeah.
I mean, you can't show her experience the way that Brad has structured this story. You can't show her experience of swimming out and realizing there's nowhere to go or whatever and coming back, because it would ruin the reveal. But not the reveal, I guess, maybe, but the end of the story, the end scene. But she goes out and swims and comes back, which means, okay, she is a strong swimmer, and also she's not prepared to let herself die out there or let him die down there.
Did you guys ever watch Saturday Night Live with Martin Short and Christopher Guest? The men's synchronized swimming? I don't know why when we keep talking about her being a strong swimmer, I keep thinking of, they had this men's synchronized swimming bit with Martin Short, and he was in there, and he comes up, and partway through it, they're interviewing him, and he's like, I'm not a very strong swimmer. And I don't know why that keeps entering into my head. It's one of those things where it like has absolutely zero to do with what we're talking about, but it's still... And I see Christopher Guest going, Gucci Goomy. I don't know why. But let's get back to the book. Because I don't know why that hit me right then and there, but it just did. But it's funny, when you're talking about, though, when they made a decision right there for either to show Mari or to show Roy, I think it would have lost some bang. I think you had to pick either or. So we either needed camera-wise to follow Mari and not know what Roy was doing, or follow Roy and not know what Mari's doing. I think the problem is it's less interesting if Roy is in the dark than it is Mari, because Roy's reaction when he's tugging on the rope and, you said you were going to tap on it. You said you were going to tug on it. Where is it? Where are you going to tug on it? You see him in there wondering, is she dead? Is she alive? What's going on? And the hopelessness that means for him, because he's ready to give up at that point. Because before even she jumped out when swimming, she said, Leon's going to have her picture have your picture in her quiver someday. So she's talking about the fact that, when your daughter follows in your footsteps, she's going to do the same thing you do. Now all of a sudden he's got to start analyzing the situation, dropping into despair. It's really like a soldier in a classic story. You want to go out in the glory of a fight, not this way. His panic was so real to me. I loved it.
Finn, do you want to say hi to the guys on the radio?
What?
They're two guys who talk about comic books on a podcast on the computer. Do you want to say hi?
Okay.
You just say hi right there.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. How cool is that?
Hold on a second.
That's cool. Little surprise guest.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Do you get to see your dad's work a lot?
Not usually.
Do you like superheroes?
Yes.
Do you have a favorite one?
Yes.
Who is your favorite superhero?
The Flash.
Oh, very cool.
Good choice.
It's a good choice. Do you have any other heroes you like besides the Flash?
Yes.
Who else do you like besides the Flash?
Batman.
Very good. Did you watch the Batman cartoon that's on TV now?
Yes.
Do you like that one?
Yeah.
Do you know who Hawkman is?
Yes.
Oh!
What do you think of Hawkman?
I like him too.
Oh, yeah, because Hawkman's on the new Batman cartoon. That's cool. Did you see that episode in the cartoon where they had Hawkman on?
Yeah.
Very nice. Do you watch the Legion of Superheroes cartoon?
Yes.
Do you have a favorite character on that one?
Yes.
Who is your favorite character on that one?
Batman.
Oh, he's a big Batman fan. I like this. I like you. You can stay.
Hawkman.
There you go. Everything's Hawkman.
Bye.
Bye. It was
Bye.
very
Real
nice
quick,
to
I'm
meet
gonna put
you.
the headset on my daughter, who is 3. Her name's Odessa.
Oh, cool.
She likes Wonder Woman.
Hello.
Who is this?
I'm Sean.
I'm Jim.
How are you?
I'm elder girls.
You like all the girls?
Yes.
Oh, good for you. There's actually a lot of good girl characters.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, well, Finn wants to say one more thing. Wait,
Okay.
Finn, what? No, don't say that. That's not nice. That's not nice. Don't say... No, don't say things about your sister. Good night, guys. You can leave that in or take that out or whatever.
I'll let it out like the awkward pauses and stuff, but that was actually really cool, especially the bits where he's talking about Batman and he likes
And he likes
figures.
Hawkman.
Well, that's going to be our new opening on every episode now. I like Hawkman. Make that a regular soundbite.
He has seen a lot of... I've got the DVDs of the old Challenge of the Super Friends cartoons with...
Oh, cool.
The ones with the Legion of Doom.
Mhm.
He's seen all of those. Well, not all of them. I've got like half of them, I guess. But he hasn't seen a lot of the Justice League cartoon because it's honestly a little too intense for him. There's just a lot of fighting.
It's funny. The Challenge of the Super Friends, though. I mean, think about it. It was developed as a very kid-friendly cartoon at the time.
It really
Whereas
is.
The Justice League cartoon was more geared to us.
Yeah. And he's seen the old Batman movie, the Adam West one.
Oh, the one where he's running around with the bomb?
Yeah.
See, actually, one of my favorite things about that one is that was the one where we got to see in one big episode all of the different Bat vehicles. You got to see the Bat boat and the Bat helicopter and the Bat,
in the first
Batmobile.
In the first half hour, you see the Bat boat and the Batcopter and the Batmobile.
Yeah, that was the nice thing about that having a bigger budget was we got to see all these different really cool... I actually got to go to the Bat Cave.
Really?
The actual real Bat Cave where they shot that.
Man.
it sounds a lot more glamorous than it is.
Oh, well.
'Cause and it was worth it to be, it smells awful. Because they used to use it as for Hollywood studios. It's been used for a number of TV shows. My buddy had a book, so I'm like, well, I want to drive to all the Batman places that, as a kid I wanted to go. And you can see, when you get up there, you can clearly see that they would have put, shrubbery around it. Because remember, there was the flap that would come down when they came out with the Batmobile. So you can actually see where that was. So I've got a picture, it's actually on our website, of my buddy and I standing in front of it. And after that, because the place now is some kind of sewage, goes through there or something. So not where the cave itself is, but leading up to it. So it just smells like, when you're getting there, my wife turns to me and goes, "Why are we walking here again through this smell?" And I said, "It's the Bat Cave." So you get up there, and that was well worth it to go up there, because I guess I'll have to go through the book and see, but there was a lot of different television shows that actually used that as a location spot for car scenes and for gunfight scenes and things like that. So we went after that, and we actually got to see the mansion, too, that was shot as the front.
That's neat.
But the trick with that is, that was another one where it was really cool to see it, but you had to get really clever. We had to actually I had to stand on part of the car to see it, because it's a real mansion that, somebody lives in, so it's gated off with big brick walls. So you have to I had to stand on the bumper of the car to look up over it to see, in the distance, a portion of the mansion. I'm like, well, that's definitely it, because you can see.
That is devotion.
Well, I mean, I'm geeking out at a corner of a house.
I've seen the Batmobile at the San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's the nice thing, because there was a few of them, I guess. There was a few of them that they used for the show. And Barris has a museum in California where he has that. And also in the museum, there is the ones there's a couple of them from the Michael Keaton movies and that were used as well. And when I was there, it was funny. The same summer that I did this was all the buzz leading up to Batman Begins. So I got to see the Tumbler too.
Ooh, neat.
Because they had it up at one of the movie places that were showing the movie theater that was showing the film. They had the Tumbler up there, and it was more the camouflage version, the one that he initially drove, the one that he asked, "Do they have it in black?"
Right.
They had that up there, but it's a cool looking vehicle. It looks very functional. And it was a real working car, I guess, but it has such a small, limited gas tank that they can only drive at very short distances because of the way it was designed.
I see.
But it does work.
Interesting. Neat.
So nice little side tangent
we got
in. Yeah. But how fun is that? Okay, so as we said, she bursts back in, and she says that she can't see sunlight. And what a gripping situation this is. It's too deep, all hope is lost. And he starts talking about how this is the end for both of them, and this is where things get even cooler, though. This is really where it got fun for me, because he's ready to fall into hopelessness, and he realizes, wait a minute, we're upside down. And it was, I like the reveal, how we're gradually getting it along with him, because he's like, oh God, and then they realize the whole thing. We start to see this cool segment where they're kind of swimming around the panels, because the panel turns upside down. Just how really turned around I really am. And this one had to have been a fun one to do, because you see her kind of digging and scratching at that point, but then they're following around the panels, swimming around them until they get back up to the top again. And then they burst through, and you have this cool segment, and seeing the two of them together, where now Roy's leading the charge. Before it was supposed to be her that was swimming them out, Roy's doing the work now, because he's figured it out, and again, taking kind of that leadership role, he leads her back up to the surface. I absolutely adored this whole segment, and adored this issue, because as I'm watching this whole thing with them, he starts analyzing her, and He talks about she's not on the team for the totem or her animal powers, even the bow or the arrow. She's on this team because she'll fight. Like Bruce taught Dick. Like Dick taught me. We all fight for different things. I'm coming, Lyon. It's all within us. And they escaped due to determination. And Roy really proved that he's right to be here as a top-tier character. She proved it. You know, Dick Grayson earned his spot out of the shadow of the bat. He earned his spot out of Ollie's shadow. And this is such a great spotlight issue.
Yeah, and I tell you, this whole scene when they're bursting out, you have all the bubble effect. You got that kind of, you know, you can hear it and you can feel it going through, and like her like she's got that bluish tint to her face, you know, so it's going through the colder water and rising up, you know, to burst through to the open air and all that. That was, for me, was just a really cool sequence as, you know, it starts the darker, then goes, you know, back up to the light, and just, that was some really neat stuff there.
I love how, too, that the people that they saved, their dialogue's in focus now, because they're closer to them. We've seen the change now in the dialogue. You know, like, they can hear them clearly. So it was fun, because this whole issue felt like a journey for me with them. And that's what I, you know, if I want a spotlight issue with a character, make me feel like I'm there with them. Make me feel like I'm in the situation with them as like an observer or as a confidant or whatever, you know, whatever reason I'm there, make me feel like I'm there. That's what comics are about for me. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, you suspend your disbelief. I want to be a part of this. Make me believe this world's real for that time, because that's the escapism of this. And that's what was cool about this issue for me. It's so the feelings of claustrophobia that I got throughout this thing was there were moments where I was creeped out.
Good.
In a way that you need to be. I mean, you should be in this issue. And I felt a lot of emotion throughout this. Fear, hope, creepiness. I don't know how claustrophobic I am in reality, but I know that I would not want to be trapped with a building piled on top of me. That's for sure.
Yeah, if you weren't claustrophobic, a situation like that would make you claustrophobic, I think.
Oh, sure. And that's the whole point of this whole thing. You start looking at it, you're like, wow, and yet they held it together, and they made it out as a team.
And I was just reminded or had just noticed that the last line of dialogue in this issue is, "The ones who saved us," which I think is a really nice cap on what the issue is all about these characters being heroes.
It just, to me, that's exactly what these characters were in this whole thing. And that's, you don't need to be told they're heroes, you need to be shown that they're heroes. And we were shown that they were heroes. If you didn't buy into it before, you buy into it now.
Yeah, anybody who can go through that is okay by me, man.
Do you have anything, a particular segment in this one? I know I'm sure we addressed in this whole thing that you're particularly proud of, where you sit there and say afterwards, like, wow, this was one that, you know, I'm so glad at how this turned out, or is there anything that, I mean, this whole issue itself is one just great, nice piece of work.
I guess if it were one thing, it would be that the splash page right near the end of them emerging out of the rubble, the splash page with all of the air bubbles. I was pretty happy with how that turned out. It's kind of a, you know, I added air bubbles to what Gene had there, not because, you know, Gene did anything wrong, but just I worked on the page and I thought I was done. I just looked at it and I thought, this still needs something. And I tried adding some air bubbles and I thought, that's it. And I was so happy just because I knew there was something not quite there about it. It needed something else. I didn't know what, and I tried a few things. And you know,
especially with, oh, go ahead.
I put some like little. This is a thing I do in like underwater scenes. Is I put floating particulates in the water, and I'll put some really close to the camera or the viewer and blur them. And you know, if you look on that splash page, you'll see some like largish white blurry blobs, and that's an example of that. Just as a way to create like more depth, I guess.
It was funny when I saw all the air bubbles, especially when they were coming around it. What dawned on me on that is the building at this point in time, because they opened it up, is going down.
Yeah. Yep.
So they put a big gaping hole in the building for them to get out because they burst out pretty quick. So it had to be a hole big enough for two, or for two to swim out very quickly, even if they went one behind the other. So you're talking about now all those air bubbles, too, are also coming from the building, as well as from them breathing and just all that's going around them. So it really, I think the amount of air bubbles was so, again, necessary to set mood and tone, because it said to me, geez, if they'd stayed in there, at some point in time, holes would have gotten into the building. Things were going to eventually crumble away and break away. They almost had to get out to live.
And they would have run out of air. I mean, they're lucky that they didn't drown immediately, first of all. But they would have run out of air, you know. And
I just want to urge everyone again, Red Rain is something that Art's working on, actually just finished up. Do you know when that's releasing, Art?
Ooh, let me look it up here. DC, let's see. I want to mention, since I'm looking at it here on the page, it's written by, the writer's name is Peter Johnson, and he is the co-executive producer of Supernatural, and also, I think, has written one or more of the issues of the Supernatural comic.
Yeah, which I believe he's doing that, if I'm correct, he's doing that, I've got the issues, I haven't read them yet, but it's with Jeff Johns. And I think they're co-writing that.
Okay, yeah.
Miniseries.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be, I think, a prequel to the TV show. I haven't read it yet. I picked them up because it was another one of those Wildstorm titles that just kind of grabbed me because it was. I like Supernatural a lot. What are you grimacing? Because you're like,
I'm making a face now. I'm like, dang it, I'm going to pick up another title.
Yeah.
Are you watching Supernatural?
I catch it every so often, and whenever I catch it, I'm like, man, this is a neat show. I should watch more of it.
But this is supposed to be a prequel, like a prelude to the series. So it's kind of a neat one, and especially with people from the show being involved, that's really cool. But it's great to see now that he's branching out a little bit more into comics. And actually, the nature of Supernatural as a TV show would lead to someone telling a Red Rain storyline.
At least my understanding is that they're doing a bunch of horror-related issues in October. I think that they're doing something in Robin with werewolves, or actually I'm looking at a page on DC's site. It's called Countdown to Halloween, which just is like a little blurb written by Eddie Berganza, who's the editor on Justice League and on the Red Rain issue I'm doing. But there's zombies in an issue of Superman, and Blue Devil's got some demons in his issue, and there's ghosts in a Flash issue, I guess, or something. So.
You know, it's funny, when Christian Bale talks about being Batman when he's in the costume, he talks about how it's so easy to get back into that mode because he's been filming the sequel. Because when you get in the suit, it's like he brings out the beast in you. And that's, he said, he understands the duality of the Batman character because he could see how a man could be very normal outside of the costume, but then when he's inside it would almost take on that quality. And Red Rain, that Batman, fits so much what he sees as being the character of Batman.
Beast. It's I just found it now. It's scheduled for November 7th.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't pre-ordered that, definitely pick that up because the Red Rain universe is something that Jim and I can both highly recommend. I'm geeked out about this one.
I remember an interview with Michael Keaton, and he was talking about the Batman costume he wore in his movies and how he had a similar reaction to having the costume on. It transforms you. Just being in that costume makes you feel... I can't remember specifically how he described it, but I remember him describing that it transformed him.
A nice breaking point right here with it being the end of this issue, so that's why I'm looking at it. I'm like, and we certainly went a lot longer this time talking about issue 11, but I'm glad because I think we got on some tangents that came off of the issue, but I think we also talked a lot more on this one about your end of the work, which is always a good thing. So I feel like this was a much... It's one of those times where I'm glad we re-recorded because I think we got a better discussion about your work. So,
well, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your time and all your interest in, your podcast, among other podcasts. It's one of the things that helps to get me through those long nights.
Well, you guys are what get us podcasting. So if you guys weren't doing what you're doing, so it's very much a two-way street. Because if it wasn't the quality of the work you guys were putting out, we'd have no interest in doing this.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
There you go. All right. Well, you have a good night. And it was, you know what? I'm glad we've got your kids on here. That's kind of cool.
That was fun. I'll be curious to hear what that sounds like, because I just got to hear his end of the conversation. So
they sounded really cool. So it was great. So that's definitely staying in. So.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Great. Bye.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Jim. See ya.
Jim, for our next segment, we have an audio comment here from Darthdad, and he did an audio comment on All-Star Batman number 7. So I want to air that real quick, and then you and I can have our own comments afterwards.
Hi, Sean and Jim. Jason Page here, Darthdad on the forums. Just wanted to give my take on All-Star Batman and Robin, issue 7. But before I do that, Sean, I have a very special clip to play for you. It's an interview with my daughter. Who do you want to be for Halloween?
I'll be Hugger Halloween.
All right, I hope you found that as laughably entertaining as I did. Okay, as for All-Star Batman and Robin number 7. First off, I like the cover, and I absolutely love the fact that it came out 2 months after issue 6. Once again, the scheduling is gotten so much better, and as you guys have said over and over again, this is a sign that DC is in fact working on the problem. And let's face it, when people just talk about late books, this is the first one where it happens. I was interviewing some webcomic creators on my show, the Fanboy Faceoff, last week, and that was one of the, when we were talking about late comic books, that was the example that was given. And now that this is more on schedule, I think this is an easy one where we can correct people now and say, well, yeah, it had its problems. Hey, the last 3 issues have in fact came out bi-monthly. Now, I wish I could go on to say that I absolutely love the issue. But the pretty Jim Lee pictures were pretty much the highlight. Once again, I enjoyed the character of Robin. I thought he was handled absolutely correctly, but to start from at the end of the book, Batman that I know would not have ever given Robin that choice of killing somebody. That just would not have been something that the Batman I know does. The beginning scenes where he's taking down the gang, I was okay with that up until he got busy with Black Canary on the dock. I just didn't. I really enjoyed Nightwing BK's forum comments about this, but I really don't know what else to say about it. But that is not the Batman that I know. And there were some humorous moments with them driving home and those things like that, but this was definitely my least favorite issue of the series. It's still amusing, but I think I'm kind of at the point where Jim was, and I'm just tired of reading the line, "I'm the goddamn Batman." I just don't want to hear that anymore. It started out really funny, and especially when it's was more sporadic, but now it seems like it's every other line of the book, and just not sure about how good that is anymore. I love the final page with the Joker card. Really looking forward to this. I guess my one hope that what's going to happen here is as sick and as twisted as he's written the Batman, that Frank Miller is going to write a classic sick, twisted Joker. Part of me, just a speculation here, kind of sees a Killing Joke style story with a character that's probably been my favorite, even though she's only appeared in one issue, that being Batgirl, and then kind of playing off the fact that, how would Jim Gordon react to that with a younger daughter rather than an adult daughter, and how does that affect his relationship with the Batman, especially at their beginning roots? So, no basis in fact on that, just some speculation on my part. Here's hoping that issue 8 will be a heck of a lot better. All right, guys, talk to you later.
All right, Jim, this is one of those books that I first of all, I want to totally agree with him. Scheduling is back on track with this book. They're definitely listening to the fans, and I can appreciate that. It's nice now that I can really start talking about just the book instead of worrying about the scheduling issue with this book, because it's coming out regularly again. I want to give a shout-out to Darthdad's Fanboy Faceoff, which I'm almost positive I have a link to on the website, and if I didn't, that's a tragedy that I need to remedy immediately, because Darthdad has been such a good friend of the show that I want to make sure I definitely have that up there. But he's a great guy. Actually, just from his audio comment, you can hear why you should be listening to his podcast if you're not already. So I can just say that speaks for itself. But Fanboy Faceoff, and that'll be on the show links for this episode. I was trying to figure out why, Jim, I keep picking up this book. Because I stopped pre-ordering it, and I've literally been going and picking it up at the shop. And I was thinking to myself, like, why do I keep getting this? I don't like Batman in it, and I totally agree with his comments in there, but there's something, in fairness, I'm not just a drone about it. There is something that's drawing me to this book. There's a ton of titles when I go into the comic shop. Something is making me grab this, and I finally got what it is. Totally agree with his comments on Robin. I've said that before. Robin's a great character in this. That's what's drawing me to it. Batgirl is another character. Commissioner Gordon, I like how they're handling him. Alfred, I'm liking almost everybody on the outside. Black Canary, I'm still kind of on the fence on. I'm not thrilled with her character, but there's something that keeps drawing me back, and I think it's the promise of what we can see as far as what Robin brings to Batman. I'm hoping that his over the top and the constant overuse of goddamn. This issue, I totally agree with. He nailed it. Way too much of him saying goddamn. Even Black Canary's using it when they're talking about his goddamn car and the goddamn this and the goddamn Batman mug. I'm going crazy with it, but I mean, it seems every time you turned around that was being used. And I'm not prude when it comes to language in my comic. I don't mind if they use that. I just don't see the point other than, obviously they're trying to make this, I guess, this obscene world.
Kind of like going for shock value.
Yeah, but it's not shocking anymore because it's been so overused. Yeah. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. What I did like about this issue, though, and it's funny, one of the parts that he didn't like is what I did like. He tested Robin. And remember when we saw him with the big axe? Well, what happens is, the axe comes down, and Bruce has come back now. The fight that he had that Black Canary was involved in that led to the bat sex between the two, the goddamn bat sex between the two, he leaves with this perp, and he's carrying him over his shoulder. You're like, what is he doing here? It turns out this is the hired thug that killed Dick Grayson's parents. He's bringing him back to the cave. Now, he brings him back to the cave, and on the way, he and Black Canary are driving along together. And when they're driving along, she's actually trying to have a meaningful conversation with him, where she's saying to him, you really should talk to people more, and kind of, and she's basically trying to say, don't go so far over the edge. There is a hero in there, and you need somebody to kind of keep you steady, keep you balanced. I liked the whole conversation, and I'm hoping that this is leading to showing the importance of Robin to Batman, to keeping him grounded. So he comes back with this perp and throws him down, and totally like Darthdad said, gives him a choice. You can kill him, or you can be a detective. Which is it going to be? And the kid's got the axe there. Now, I guess for me, I was reading it, and I'm not saying that this is right, because you got to draw from what Dick Grayson does. If you go on just visually what they're showing you there, it didn't look like Batman was going to stop him at all, no matter what his choice was going to be. But I guess in my eyes, I looked at it as if Batman really believed there was a possibility he could kill the guy, he could have stopped him. I don't think Bruce really believed he was going to do that. I thought this was his way of letting him see that life is full of choices. You could kill this guy, but you're better than this. He throws the axe down on the guy and cuts off, the tape covering his mouth instead. And from that, this is where they start getting information on who hired him. At the end, they do this little inner dialogue where it's like, what he revealed is not what I wanted to hear, and then you see the Joker card at the end. It was a cool little setup. I actually really liked the moment because he wasn't doing the overtop swearing or anything like that. It was really a moment where it was like, this is do or die. Kid, you got to decide whose side you're on. And after Dick cuts that off, Dick starts attacking the guy basically to rough him up to get information out of him. He's doing a Batman-like moment with him. And Bruce is analyzing his moves. He's watching him, taking a look at what's going on and saying, if he did that kick in a real fight, he would be setting himself up to be attacked. It was really cool to watch Bruce seeing this protege of his and analyzing him for future and for potential as far as being a partner, which, would obviously lead to his training. And he even comments to him at the end, you did a pretty good job there, but there was one kick that would have been the end of you. I liked those moments. It was at those moments I was like, okay, I'm starting to see Batman here. And I'm hoping that when we see more of the interaction between these two in later issues, we get away from the goddamn Batman, more into seeing that having Dick Grayson as a focus, having the training of Dick Grayson as a partner, might lead to more of what we expect from Batman. I don't know. It is that promise, though, that keeps drawing me back to this book. That, and I agree with him. I want to see what's going to happen with Batgirl. Hopefully she'll be around for that Joker issue. There are some moments there where I'm seeing that. So I'm picking this book up because I'm genuinely curious to see where it's going to go. There are things I passionately dislike, exactly what he said in there. But I did like the moments, the interaction between Batman and Robin in those particular segments I thought were... I guess my assumption out of there is what made it good for me. You aren't buying this, are you?
No, I am not. I didn't even read this issue before we do our discussion, so I'm basing all my comments on just what I've heard from Darthdad and from you. And I even intentionally avoided spoilers on the forum because I didn't want to know anything going into this recording. And I tell you, one thing that I think with the Batman... it's about the anticipation of what's going to come. You're wondering where it's going to go, but not the actual event as you're reading it. And because you're talking about looking forward to the Joker. Well, is the Joker going to pay off? You were looking forward to when Batgirl first came in, that paid off. Mm-hmm. But the end of that issue had Batman and Black Canary. Looking forward, what's going to happen there? That didn't pay off, though. So it's the anticipation of what's going to happen.
I don't know that the Batman Black Canary moments didn't pay off because we haven't... I think where that was meant to lead was to the two of them having a reason to have that discussion in the car where she's trying to point out to him that he needs that somebody to talk to. He needs that to get away from the isolationist that he is and open himself up a bit. That's what I got, and I might be digging for this, but that's what I got that was the important moment out of that. It wasn't the shock value of them having sex or being drawn into that. It was that moment led to a reason why she'd even be in his Batmobile, his goddamn Batmobile, and even talking to him to begin with. And that's where, I think, to me, there are moments when they were talking in there and she needed somebody, leading right into his moments with Dick Grayson. That's where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see, I think, where this is heading. I do like that. I want to see it head in that direction. It's what I've wanted from this thing all along. So I'm hoping that we start seeing more of that with the Joker issue, that this is where it's heading. What does Robin bring to the table? Why is he important for our Batman? And what does that go? Are we going to see that sharp contrast? There was definitely a different tone to Bruce's inner dialogue when he was there with Dick Grayson in the cave, after the perp was there. It was definitely a lot less of the sick and twisted. Like in the beginning, just for an example, in the beginning, before Black Canary and him, had their moment, the villains are shooting at each other, and he makes a comment, to himself, inner dialogue wise, that cool, they're killing themselves. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can see that to a certain extent because, it's better that they're killing themselves than anyone else. But I think he meant that it was cool that they were killing themselves because that's less, thugs that he has to deal with. To me, Batman wouldn't do that. That's not the kind of justice Batman dishes out. That's more of Punisher justice. Let's kill him. Batman would bring him to justice in the sense that he would want them put behind bars. He would want them... Although in this universe right now... it's clear that he doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in the police. So where do you put him?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard for me right now because this is a very different Bat universe. But I did like the second half of the issue a lot more than I liked the first half. And the second half was really where I started to kind of see a tone change in Bruce Wayne that I'm hoping wasn't something that I imagined. I'm hoping it's something that tends to build in the next couple of issues. Or I don't know how much longer this run has, but it was definitely that second half was one where I'm like, this is the payoff that I want to start seeing, and I'm hoping that I'm not imagining it. I'm hoping that is where it's going. From the audio comments in this discussion, do you have any urge to read this?
Kind of, actually. I do kind of have an urge to borrow your copy and read it. I still wouldn't pay money for it, but I would definitely, borrow it.
That is kind of telling, though.
Yeah.
Like me, I paid money for it. It is funny, though. I stopped pre-ordering it. So I was passionately enough against it, where the portrayal of Batman was enough that I said, I don't even want to buy this anymore. But I am still picking it up. And I do. When I looked at the issue on the shelf, I saw the cover, and I'm like, and I go to the comic shop every week because I look for some things that I'm not picking up both in DC and outside of DC that interest me. What are some things that are out there that maybe I'm not normally picking up that I might want to try out. So I do that, and this is something, it was one of my choices. I picked the book up. So there is something that's drawing me to this book, and I think that's what it is. It's the promise of where the payoff might be with the relationship with Batman and Robin. I agree with him. It does help that it's coming out more regularly, because I have my feelings about Batgirl in the previous issue. I really enjoyed that segment, so there was enough of that in me that I'm like, the Batgirl moments were really cool. I liked her relationship with Jim Gordon in there. Maybe there's going to be some more of those moments in this one. I do want to pick it up, and that did affect my purchase. So I will say that that's one where DC listening to their fans actually was a deciding factor to me on this one, on whether or not I picked it up. If this had been a 6 months in between where I'd forgotten what went on, I don't know that I would have picked up this issue.
Now, one thing, though, I am curious to see what the Joker's going to be like in this universe. So, but not curious to the point when the issue comes out, I'll run out and buy it. Curious to the point that when the issue comes out, I'll hop online, I'll see what people say about it, check out the forums, Newsarama.
Can I page through yours?
What?
Can I page through yours?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But, that will definitely, but it's still in my mind, though. Mm-hmm. That is a plus. So
I am glad he pointed out the scheduling thing, though, because I do think that is a major factor in why I actually have this issue. So, actually, thank you for the audio comment, because it is a good one. I don't know that I wasn't ready to dive into doing something on this book again, because I think I'd kind of said how I felt about Batman. I said that there were some characters who I was still attached to, but Bruce himself I wasn't enjoying. And I'm glad we got to talk about this issue, because there were more moments in it that I enjoyed than I realized. And it really is more the second half of the issue, so there you go. You know what, Jim? You want to talk a little countdown?
Sure.
Okay.
Our next discussion is on countdown number 33. The writer is Paul Dini with Adam Beechin. Breakdowns by Keith Giffen. Pencils by Carlos Magno. Inks by Jay Liston. Colors by Tom Chu. Letterer Jared K. Fletcher. Covers by Talon Caldwell with J.D. Smith. Assistant editors Schaefer and Garland, and editors Marks and Carlin. We open up with the Rogues basically begging for their life. They tell Wally how the plan is to attack Green Arrow and Black Canary's wedding, and they also mention that they happen to have explosive chips planted in their neck. Cool moment, Wally just looks at him, his hands just start vibrating, and he tells him, hold still, this is going to hurt a lot. He, phases into them or vibrates into them, whatever you want to technically call it, removes the chips, and then zips out and disposes them. I really dig seeing the Flash in motion, and just you see that that yellow streak and that kind of whoosh kind of. They didn't actually have that sound effect in there, but it reminds me in my head when I see that. So I dig seeing that.
They had the kawoom though.
They had the kawoom, yeah. And I like seeing that. So I'm really looking forward to see how Freddy's going to draw that. That should be some cool stuff coming out in the Flash series.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Freddy taking over on that book, because I think it's going to be an interesting look. The Rogue segment to me remains one of my favorite. It's not my number one. It still remains Mary Marvel, but this is definitely one of the ones I'm latching onto. I loved the moments with Piper pleading with him, and how Piper seemed to be the voice of reason that was starting to get through to Wally to at least a certain extent. versus the trickster being the one.
Yeah, and you can still see it in Wally's face that he still has that same determination, but he is starting to believe them. Because in the end, he really wants to believe that Piper, especially Piper, is good and didn't turn on him, and that Piper wasn't part of killing Bart. He wants to believe that this person that he helped reform is still an honest and one of the good guys.
What I liked about this is you see the lead up to the wedding from the rogue's perspective. So it's one of those things that even if you didn't read any of the wedding stuff, you get what you need to as far as the rogue's actual involvement leading up to it. You find out here that they knew information that could potentially, potentially Green Arrow and Black Canary could be in a whole heap of trouble at the wedding. And we've seen from reading the wedding stuff what actually happens there, but that's beside the point. We really just get to see what their involvement is because they don't really have a major involvement anywhere in those wedding issues, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I like about it. This is separate. It's kept outside. Very similar to how Holly's story wasn't really a part of Amazon's attack. It's been outside of Amazon's attack. I'm glad that they're reacting to events that are happening in the universe, but they don't have you don't have to go and read the wedding stuff to follow what's going on with the rogues. It takes place right here in Countdown. You can go and follow it. If you have zero interest in Green Arrow and Black Canary being married, right here you've seen what their role is in the whole thing. Let's keep moving on.
Yeah, especially even in future issues of Countdown, you see even farther what happens. So they're telling a complete contained story within Countdown.
Right. Which has additional payoff for people that are following the wedding, but you don't need to.
Right. Well, Waller returns after disposing of the exploding chips, and he's starting to, trust them a little bit, and even says that he doesn't completely trust them, but the explosives were real, and they didn't try to run off when they left, so he's kind of coming around slowly. Now, granted, when I heard Wally's explanation as to why he was kind of starting to trust him, it did throw me off a little bit, because A, villains would plant live explosives in a colleague's neck just to throw off a hero. Because if the guy dies, oh well, it was just Piper and Trickster. And B, they know Wally. If they tried to run, do you honestly think they would have gotten away from him?
What worked for me there, though, is it's these two particular rogues and their relationship with Wally. I think he sees that, first of all, would you believe the Trickster would try to blow himself up? Or agree to let himself be blown up? No.
Well,
and Piper, especially, I don't see letting do that. So where it worked for me is you're seeing explosive chips in their neck, which would lead me to believe that, all right, maybe these two are on the up and up because they wouldn't let this happen to themselves.
But they really wouldn't have a choice, though.
Oh, that's true.
We are talking about Deathstroke, so it's not like, you can say,
and he does say
I don't like that plan. Why don't we go with plan B?
Right. But he does say then, Wally does come back and say, but I don't completely trust you.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm...
And that's where it totally works.
Oh, I agree completely. And it's, there is a lot of inner turmoil, and you can see it in his face, which is some really cool artwork stuff. And
they don't trust him either.
No.
Because the second he contacts Zatanna, all bets are off because they're thinking mind wipe.
That was awesome, dude. They're like, Zatanna, it's me, Flash. Mind wipe! They started running.
And both are victims of the mind wiping. So they don't want that again.
Yeah, but they don't get away too far, and they're Wally, Piper and Trickster all teleported out. But I tell you, it was a really cool ending panel of that where it was just Bart's grave. And I kind of dig that.
It was one of those little moments where it's kind of like, because it was set off by itself. Nobody else was in the panel. It was just his grave. Those moments where you show a statue, like they show that Superman and Connor Kent statue every so often in various books. When you see those little tributes to these heroes, when you see a Barry Allen statue or you see a shadowy Barry Allen, behind Hal Jordan like you've seen in Justice League, those are moments where it's kind of like they give you a little bit of a goosebump thing. Again, I go back to it's being very real for me. These are people you care about. They're people you followed. Bart Allen, we followed in his book. You followed through Impulse, Young Justice, Titans. He's a character that has developed a following. And those moments where you see his grave and you get kind of choked up or just nostalgic for the character, like you almost want to see him there. You want to see that kid. I want to see Kid Flash come out again.
You want to see Impulse come out and say, hey, guys, how's it going?
Yeah, everything's cool.
Okay, well, then we continue on with the challengers, and when we last saw our challengers, Donna Troy was being pulled into a vortex by the evil Queen Belthera. I don't know why I just did that. I just felt like throwing it out there.
I don't either.
It seems
Our
like
last episode.
Exactly. Sometimes with when we're doing these, it fits. And this is one of those things because
will they live or will they die?
I know. Dun dun dun.
When you're doing that, I'm sitting there, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah. But yeah, so Donna's being sucked down with the evil queen, and Jason goes to jump right in after her, but Ryan, kind of stops and saves him. Bob is recovering, but he still can't do anything because he doesn't got his mojo going yet. And then off camera, you see everyone just relax as Kyle arrives. One of the things I did notice as we're going through a lot of these segments, and especially with the challengers, the individual segments are longer than they have been in the past. And it's kind of really cool because it helps further develop on the story. When we first started talking some countdown stuff, there was a lot of boom, 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 boom between the different stories. Now they're letting them flesh out more. They're doing less topic per issue.
And that is something that I was talking about this last time we talked Countdown. It is something, it was mentioned on our forum as well, it is something I'm enjoying more too, because I think we get a little bit more into the characters now. They were doing the very short spurts at the beginning, and this does pay off here.
Yeah. And I tell you, Kyle's arrival, that was a full-page spread, and it looked really cool with, he comes in, and it's just that, riding in, here comes the cavalry type thing. It was a neat little... It was a neat-looking one. I like that.
I have a question as you talk about that segment. The artwork for me, I'm enjoying it. But one of the things I'm noticing with Countdown versus 52, there's a lot more drastic jumps between the art styling in issues than there was in 52. How are you liking that? Is that bothering you? Is it something you're not enjoying? Is it something you're enjoying? I notice it in this, but I'm enjoying all of the artists that are involved in Countdown, so for me it's not an issue. I think they're each bringing something unique. I saw on this one that Keith Giffen did the breakdowns. I'm not sure how his involvement's working because I don't see him being credited on every issue. I'm seeing him... Right. I don't know if he is involved in every issue and we're just not seeing that credit, or if it's he's being involved in broken issues and we're just seeing, that when necessary. But there's a definite difference in the art styling between certain issues. I'm not having an issue with it. I'm enjoying the art overall across the board. What about you? Are you noticing the differences? Is that bothering you? Do you enjoy the art?
I'm noticing the differences in the different styles, but it's not bothering me at all.
Okay.
The thing is, if you look at all the arts, all the different art styles, they're different, but they are kind of similar. There's no dramatic, completely off the, curve art style. They're not throwing in some artsy-fartsy, just, completely, cutting edge type art style.
And maybe that's why Keith Giffen's being brought in on certain issues versus others. I don't know. Maybe he's in on all of them. I'm personally noticing that when I look at the credits, he's not credited on every issue. So I'm guessing they bring him in on select issues to maybe try to keep a certain amount of consistency here. But I'm definitely noticing art differences here in a way that I didn't notice it in 52. Mm-hmm. It's not bothering me at all, though. It actually adds more weight to me that I'd like to see, if it's an issue of keeping the book on time, more attempts at doing a fill-in artist if necessary to keep a book on time and going, because I'm enjoying all the art here. And that's no knock on anybody doing the art in any way, shape, or form. I just think that they've got solid artists who are doing a good job.
Agree.
Okay.
So Kyle shows up and he starts fishing for Donna. It's kind of interesting. You see Jason and Kyle immediately start off at each other, and Jason starts getting impatient. Well, do you really want to distract someone whose power depends on willpower and concentration? Kyle, being the man that he is, snags Donna and pulls her back. Bob tells Kyle that his people have marked him for termination as well, and Jason, being Jason, wouldn't be the worst idea. Kind of small print, a little whisper off to the side, mumbling underneath his breath.
I like the little jealousy.
Yeah.
I like that. It's very subtle, but it fits because he's basically had, he and Donna have had those moments. And you got to remember, Jason Todd has had very few people since he's returned, if anybody, that he could relate to. He and Donna's like the first person that he's really had something in common with that's basically gotten along with him.
He's pretty much the first person that hasn't wanted to kill him, so that's, a plus.
Yeah. But I mean, really, it's realistically like everyone else has been kind of shunning him. And in this case, and it's Donna's nature that this so totally works for Donna. You know, she would be the one that would listen, and she would be the one to try to get to the root of what's really going on without making snap judgments. And that's what really is working here for this.
Yeah,
Just a little side note on this one. As of when we're recording this, in Green Lantern Corps right now, and it's funny, we're having this discussion now, and I'm finding that my opinions on Kyle and what's going on here have not changed, but it's even more of a hell yeah moment. I would encourage you to go back and reread some of these issues of Countdown, and even reread that issue of All New Adam, now that, if you've been reading Sinestro Corps, now that we know how Kyle got from A to B. Because it is really kind of cool to see him coming in. And some of his dialogue so totally fits for me here on where we saw Kyle at in Sinestro Corps in the most recent issues. It never bothered me that we knew this ahead of time, but it definitely does add something to this, looking at this concept now and looking what's happening in these issues now after that's already happened with Kyle.
Yeah. I tell you, I kind of like the whole love triangle they're starting to set up, but normally the love triangle is not my favorite tool utilized by comics or TVs or movies, especially if you're dealing in a situation where it's a combat emphasis, sort of, where it's, action adventure where you got to go in and you got to kick butt. Because I usually end up, sitting at one point in time yelling, at whatever medium, like, come on, focus, just, move on, forget about the young lady and move on and just, you got a job to do. Don't get snagged up with the little stuff. And I don't know.
But let's take a look at what happened to, like, we just talked about Jason, why this relationship's important to Jason. Let's take a look at Kyle. Equally important reasons for wanting Donna. His whole life, Donna's all that's left. Donna is the one who's still alive. No, really. I mean, think about it. Jade's gone, his girlfriend's gone, his mother's gone, and this is a lot of what happened. He went through a lot of changes in Sinestro Corps. Now he's back and he's here with this girl again, who it's the one that he was in love with that's still there, that's still around. It's a part of his past that he can hold on to, and someone who he always truly cared about. And it's interesting to see this dynamic happen again, because he would rush to her. So, especially after the ending of Ion. The ending of Ion, the two of them kind of bonded together, but he's been through a lot, and he's come back now, and I think he appreciates his life in a way. He always appreciated life, but I think he appreciates it now in a very different way. This love triangle, to me, storytelling-wise, considering the characters, it adds a lot to the dynamic here, because he and Jason are a lot more alike in why they're bonding with Donna and why they want to hold on to that relationship, a lot more alike than they realize.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Phil. No, seriously.
I like that, though. I really do. That, to me, when I can think that deep into it, and into characters' relationships, it's not surface level. It's beyond that. And that does... I'm a geek out for when these things feel real to me. And that is one of the things, that's why it grabs me, because I'm like, oh, it's all the more powerful now. Especially seeing more of what's happened in Sinestro Corps with Kyle, it totally is, it's working for me. The Parallax issue is one that really beefs this up.
So Kyle lets them know that the Guardians sent him there to... Basically, because Ray's not there in the nanoverse anymore, he's gone to the multiverse. Next, we head over to Black Mary, and she's in some type of energy bubble, and Clarion tells her to cover her ears. We get this huge scree-kaboom explosion, and one of the vendors right there starts claiming it was self-defense, that Mary approached his booth uninvited and disturbed his spells. Mary handles this matter in her usual rational manner and is about to blast the dude into next week when Clarion snaps her back into reality. Something I didn't really catch the first time I read this through was that the old dude was probably trying to siphon power from Mary. Clarion caught him and put the energy bubble up around her to protect her. I liked how this story led you think
the other part where that's really cool too is because Clarion's doing this for selfish reasons. I never believe that he's doing it to actually genuinely help Mary.
See, I don't know.
Wait, think about what he wants.
We'll get to that in about a minute.
Okay.
But because I got some theories on that as well.
Okay, all right. I'm curious to see that. See, to me, I'm kind of like, well, see, because Clarion's one of those. I don't think Clarion's a bad guy. I don't mean it that way. But Clarion's a gray area where Clarion's intentions and what Clarion's after, I don't know, always would be considered pure intentions by the general populace. Mm-hmm. And I do like that about Clarion.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he's the great white hope here. He's a little bit on the touch of gray to him, and he does say that he just wants a little fraction of her power, just a little taste of it.
But I think he wants what the old guy was trying to take.
See, I don't.
To me, that's how I'm not saying that you're wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying it's different perspectives on maybe how we read this. The old guy was trying to siphon something for himself, and it looks like Clarion's now like, hey, I'm going to protect you because I want that.
It could be, but it's really next issue we see some more where this goes into. The story of Mary and Clarion really come to a head next issue, and I'm like, that's where I wanted to throw comments from that. I'm like, wait till that issue,
because we'll continue it further, but it's an interesting relationship, and I like it.
Okay. Next, we got Jimmy Olsen on the run. It's kind of funny. This kid, you feel bad for him because he goes to Steelworks to get some help, and he doesn't really get any help other than the fact that John Henry's like, I don't think you're human anymore, buddy. Much less, I don't know what you are. He steps out of Steelworks, and he's starting to be followed. So he tries to ditch him, but his powers won't kick in because he can't control when his powers fire up. He starts actually running through traffic, trying to put himself in harm's way just so things fire up. And the cars and the drivers don't mean to hurt him, so his powers naturally do not kick in, which, once again, is another problem with Jimmy's superpowers.
And he's actually causing traffic problems, which is the great thing about this. Here's this superhero who, in order to trigger his powers, he has to put other people at risk because he wants them to hurt him.
Yeah.
I mean, really, a guy weaving in and out of traffic like he's running is not the most superheroic thing to do because somebody else could get hurt in that process.
Dude, very easily someone could get hurt.
Right. A pedestrian walking by, people in vehicles. It's like, so that when I was watching that, I'm like, this is the difference between Jimmy's powers. This is why a Jimmy would not be on a Justice League. This is why there was a Legion of Substitute Heroes. Because there's certain powers and there's certain ways that you generate your powers that aren't useful. And this isn't one of them. It is to protect yourself. It's self-defense, but he would not be a good guy to have on a mission.
Right. He would actually be a better, guardian at the watchtower. Because if there's ever a risk, it's someone coming to the watchtower to take him down and to take down the JLA.
As long as they're going to attack him, though, what happens if they come in to take over the watchtower but never put a hand on him?
Yeah, that would be a problem.
That'd be kind of funny to see. Thing, yeah, just don't touch him and everything will be fine. Kindly shackle him.
But can you see this Deathstroke just going up to him? Excuse me, young man, I am going to destroy that building right behind you. Oh, no, I'm not going to harm you in any way, shape, or form.
As a matter of fact, just for your own safety, I'm going to tie you up over here in the corner.
Exactly. So Jimmy has no place in the superhero universe.
I want this to be a monthly book so bad. It would be a great comedy.
What, just
Jimmy's the new ambush book. Like everybody knows his limitations. Will somebody please kill me so I can attack these guys?
Hey, I wonder. Okay, now you have these powers, and you have a sidekick who attacks you, tries to kill you, just so you have these superpowers, and then you attack the bad guys.
You have to have a really ornery... What is this, like the new Inspector Clouseau?
Exactly,
He had the...
He told
Juju or whatever his name was.
Was it Kato or... No, Kato's Green Hornet.
Yeah. I don't know. There was a different guy. There was a little guy in the cartoon that used to always fight with him.
Yeah.
And then in the movies with Peter Sellers, there was a guy who used to attack him too. I forget his name. What his name was, but it was like He's the Inspector Clouseau of the DCU.
Ambush Bug, Inspector Clouseau, he's got it all.
I am enjoying this, though. I really am. Like, the more it's going on, I'm really having a lot of fun with this. Because I joke around with it like it's goofy and silly. And while it is, I could imagine being in that position where you're in a world of superheroes. You've got what you know are pretty cool powers. Because they are cool when they kick in. But it's, how frustrating would that be? To know that, like, I can do all these things in the right situations, but not being able to trigger those situations when you want to.
Yeah, that's the whole difference. You know, it's not... Yeah, poor dude, man. You feel bad I do feel bad for him. And I'm hoping, in the end, something good happens to Jimmy. I now can 100% say I do not want to see Jimmy Olsen die. I can 100% say that without any hesitation.
You've been saying that for like the last 10 issues.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. When I've been saying that, I really haven't completely meant it.
So wait, so now you're 101% behind it?
Now I'm 100% behind Jimmy Olsen.
But you said that before. What's different now?
I don't know.
How do we know that you're serious this time?
Well, if he was in the room and I were to attack him, his powers would not kick in.
Because you wouldn't really be.
I wouldn't really want to hurt him.
Okay. Whereas before,
he probably would have gone spiky on me.
Okay.
Okay. Turns out the guys following him aren't bad guys. They're from Cadmus, and they've been monitoring him, watching him, and they want to study him, see what's going on. And it's interesting because they say, "Hey, we're from Cadmus. We don't want to hurt you." And obviously they didn't want to hurt him because his powers never kicked in.
And he knows who Cadmus is, and he has a history with Cadmus. He has a history with various scientists and things like that from his past. Actually, this is, again, they're starting to pull things from Jimmy's past and from the Fourth World Omnibus into this story. People that he trusts, relationships that he trusts are being brought in. This is another trusted relationship here that he's hopefully going to be able to use. In his eyes.
Right. Next we see the Rogue and the Flash. They arrive in some type of hotel suite, and the second they arrive, Trickster asks, "Where is the mind wipe doohickey?" But Wally says, we don't do that anymore. He drops them off, in the...
Wait, and here's an interesting part about that, too, though. It's interesting to see what the Rogues think happened with the mind wipe. They blame it on the entire League. They aren't just blaming it on Zatanna. Where's Zatanna and the others with all your mind wipe doohickeys? Not just saying Zatanna did this. They think they actually have machines or things that are behind this, and this was a League decision that everyone was behind. And this is something that Justice League does. It's like the game of telephone. They've all, they went through this, but they've all become convinced that they understand how it works, and they're still not 100% sure. And what they've heard maybe from other villains and what actually was happening with mind wiping are not necessarily true. Before it was just Zatanna doing it, and that's why Zatanna's name was mentioned first. But now the story's become, but the rest of the League, they have all these mind wipe gadgets and things, and they do this. This is part of what the League does.
Well, plus also what they did to Dr. Light. Because they didn't just mind wipe him, they messed with his mind, and they made him a laughingstock. Took this hardcore villain and made him a joke.
Well, that's what they did to all of them, though, they were saying. They used Dr. Light as an example to say this is why a lot of the villains in the Silver Age and straight on through started becoming less of a threat and more cartoony, was because they were mind wiped at one point.
Okay, see, I took Dr. Light was the only one they did that to. Everybody else,
actually, and if you look back, actually, when they describe it in Infinite Crisis, they talk about how, did you notice how some of the villains became less threatening? So they didn't start naming names, but they implied that Dr. Light was not the only one that this happened to. So it's one of the cool things about the story was that he wasn't the only one who's played with.
Cool.
And that was actually, the Rogues were, again, go back to things like the Rogue War, with from Jeff Johns and the stuff that spun out afterwards in the Flash books. A lot of the Flash Rogues that became less threatening and more cartoony and friends of Wally were the ones that were mind wiped. That's why Piper was his pal. His very nature was changed. That's why the Trickster, his nature was changed. There was a number of Rogues who, fit that bill.
Now, has their personality reverted back to where they were before that?
You see where the Trickster is. He's become He's starting to revert back again. Piper reverted back, sort of. But things that had happened to him, he chose to maintain the relationships that he had. So it was interesting.
Okay.
It was really interesting. Because his friendships with Wally and Linda were pretty solidified at this point. And remember, Wally wasn't around for any of that. That was Barry, not Wally. So there's actually an interesting story in the Flash issues that was told about Barry Allen's role in all this, and Wally dealing with Barry Allen's role, and that's traded as well. I forget the actual title of it right now, but the issues of the Flash that dealt with Wally's realization that Barry was one of the people that was a part of the decision to mind wipe.
Dude, that would have to be a tough one, because you think about just how much respect Wally has for Barry, and just it was the Flash, it's Barry, and
there's some great moments with Wally and Oliver Queen in it too. So I don't remember the name of it right now, but I would definitely highly recommend it. It's one of the Flash trades, and when you see the title of it, you can tell right away, and you can click on the blurb, I'm sure. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but there is a Flash trade that's out that takes place right around the end of Identity Crisis, where Wally deals with what happened here. And also, I would continue going on and read JLA Crisis of Conscience if you haven't read that one. That one I do remember. That was the title of that one, because that was the subtitle of the story. And that's Batman's dealing with the mind wiping and what happened. But through both of those stories, you get to see how big this was. Catwoman had to deal with a lot of this, because she was one of the people that was a victim of mind wiping.
Really?
Yeah, and Selina had to very much deal with that, so...
Dang.
To the point where she starts questioning who she really is. Because...
Now, did she get wiped before or after Hush?
Before.
Okay.
They went pretty far back. So, that just shows that a lot of what she believed changed along the way. So, interesting.
Cool. Well, okay. So, Flash drops them off in this hotel-type suite, while he goes and investigates, what they said about Black Canary and Green Arrow. He doesn't exactly completely trust them, so the shock chain stays on, and he warns them, do not leave, or you will regret it. As soon as he's out the door, Trickster wants to bail. He's like, we can't trust them, they're going to mind wipe us. When everything is said and done, they're going to come back and it's going to be worse. Our brains they're going to turn our brains into jello. And Piper's like, no, Wally said stay here. Well, Trickster knocks Piper out and then drags him out of the suite. And we see exactly what Wally warned him about regretting it, because as soon as they open the door, there's Z's pet mummy with a big old sword just swinging at him. So it was a kind of a neat thing when you open the door, you see this thing like, oh boy, not a good thing.
And the funny part is they were told not to leave, but it fits these two so perfectly. Every situation, every decision that they make seems to lead to putting them into peril. It's really like the two of them they're just like accident prone.
They're like cursed, dude. It's, they're cursed for the out of the frying pan into the fire curse. No matter what they do, it's always going to get worse.
Don't they seem to be Trickster's decisions all the time, though, that lead to this? Trickster jumped them out of the plane. Trickster brought them to Penguin. Wasn't it Trickster brought them to Penguin? I think it was.
Yeah, it was
Piper.
Trickster, yeah.
The situation with Poison Ivy. Now this. He might be the ultimate survival tactic, but he also gets them in a lot of hairy situations. Plus, you know what the truth is, though? I can understand the worry. They don't know that the League and superheroes in general don't do the mind-wiping thing anymore. They don't know that. So I could understand that being a major concern. This is something they did that was so widespread that they don't know the backstory, that the League really, as a whole, wasn't aware this happened. It was only a small group of them that were in on the voting. And that a lot of the big people like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman were not in on it. Even though they sort of knew. Especially Superman. There was that hinting that Superman knew.
Well, Superman knew. Big time.
And was ignoring it, right.
Yeah.
So it is still one of those... It's an interesting story and a concept that goes all the way back to Identity Crisis, and we're still seeing unfolding today, and I like that.
that's a sign of a significant event that you will keep seeing it over and over and over, and there's little threads here and there that just tie into it. So that's cool that they're doing it. Yeah. The issue ends with the challengers, and we're seeing Donna, Donna being Donna. She's making sure Jason is cool with Kyle joining them. And Jason, of course, is trying to act like it's not bothering him. He's being all sarcastic. Oh, yeah, he's just dreamy. You can see the vulnerability of Jason coming out, especially when he's dealing with Donna.
And the look on his face. The look on his face, he's turned away from her. The hands up, he doesn't want to look at her straight in the face. I love that. Because it does show the real emotion, like, yeah, sure you mean that.
And also, to make matters worse for him, Kyle is going to start taking over transportation duties, telling, Ryan, hey, don't worry, you can ease up on the bank stick, I'll handle maneuverability. Once again, he's, showing up Jason that what he brings to this team. He's got the Green Lantern ring, which is a pretty cool, weapon/device to have in the fight.
And this is where we see Ryan getting pulled out of the whole situation. And the cool thing about this was, at this point, it actually adds a common thread to the heroes that are in this now. All the heroes that are involved in this group now are heroes that are supposed to be dead. Mm-hmm. They're all, Kyle, Donna, and Jason are all heroes from our universe that are supposed to have died instead of somebody else.
Yeah, and we see that how, Kyle and Donna both want to go after Ryan. And, Jason's the first one to say, hey, forget it. He's the Atom, but he's not the Atom we are looking for. Bob steps up, concurs that their mission is just so much more important that, Ryan's on his own. Kyle goes along with it, but this is something that's over and over going to be brought up again. It's not setting well with him, and he even says he was taught you don't leave a man behind. So it's, once again, more stuff for Kyle and Jason to butt heads over.
You know what I liked about this issue, Jim? There was no unnecessary cliffhanger. I mean, there's kind of a cliffhanger in the sense that where the challenger is going to go now, but there wasn't that big bang, somebody's in peril cliffhanger. It was just kind of a nice ending. I mean, it was definitely like, leaves you where the challenger's going to go and all that, but it wasn't like an unnecessarily like, oh my God moment at the end. He was pulled away. This sets the status quo. The challengers are now going on to continue their search for Ray. Kyle's now a member of the group. I actually like that. I'm not knocking it anyway. I think it was a nice ending to the issue. It ended off where they were at currently and they were traveling on, obviously, to a new world, into the multiverse now to kind of go looking around. But it sets up the mini-series and sets up their further adventures and countdown, and I liked it. It was just kind of a nice, solid ending without it having to be over the top for no reason.
Agree completely. And I like Bob's final line that he had in this. I sympathize, Kyle Rayner. The choice we make is necessary but difficult, and I feel that is far from the last difficult choice we shall face. Kind of that ominous type tone setting to it, like what exactly they're going to have to deal with. Are their hands going to get a little bit dirty in the mix? And I'm always a big proponent on you hear voices in my head when I'm reading some of this stuff, and I tell you, I'm hearing Avery Brooks' voice whenever Bob talks. Now, if you don't know who Avery Brooks is, he's Benjamin Sisko of Star Trek DS9, and he was also a man called Hawk from Spencer for Hire, and his own little And I hear his voice whenever I'm reading Bob's stuff now.
That's funny. I didn't see that. I can see where you're getting that though, because he has that kind of, especially considering he's the good monitor.
Right.
I almost kind of want him separated now from the other monitors. He's like the rational one.
Yeah. The backstory is the origin of the Riddler. And this was really cool for me because I know about the Riddler, but I really don't know what the continuity is. What is DCU? What is the movie? What is the campy TV show? What is the cartoons? This gave me a nice little picture of who he is, where he comes from. I digged it. I like a lot of stuff about the Riddler that they're doing. I like how he's legit-ish, with his own little private investigation firm.
Did you read into the stuff post-Hush? Like post-Hush before, like face-to-face with the Riddler?
No.
Okay, so you didn't see any of the stuff where we found out that he doesn't, in fact, have his memory and.
Yeah, see, I know that they had in one of the Detective Comics that had the Riddler in it. It showed that he no longer remembered, and I honestly didn't like that. I want to, do they actually go into depth how he loses the memory and whatnot?
No, but I think they're doing that on purpose to make you question whether or not it's actually been lost. Rather than having some huge trauma that you see on camera, giving you kind of a look at, okay, is he really without it? Or are at some point in time going to see that memory come back? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's one of those things where, to me, I find the fact that we aren't sure if that memory's permanently gone, I find that interesting.
See, that I find interesting. If we find out later that he knew all along this whole time, I would like that. Because I was really upset when he lost that memory, because I like the fact that he knew the ultimate riddle, but wasn't going to share it with anybody, because why spoil, when you know the greatest puzzle of all times? Why spoil it? I like that rationale that he wouldn't give it out. It fits into his his psychoses that he can't help. It's ingrained into his nature. This is part of who the Riddler is. So, Yeah,
I'm curious to see where it's going to go. Do you like him as the detective that's running around Gotham right now? Are you enjoying that aspect of the story?
Oh, big time. Yeah, I like, and just like how Penguin is kind of legit. Right. I like that. They're changing.
But they both feel like they aren't. Even though they are, they feel like at any point in time, I feel like the Riddler's got his own agenda.
At any point in time, I feel like the Riddler will end up, getting a big case, and instead of solving it, maybe pocket some stuff, or that Penguin is just dealing. Some of the booze in Penguin's restaurant fell off the back of a truck. You know that for a fact, and he's probably running some stolen goods through the, in the front door, out the back type stuff. These guys are legit, but they're not, golden and squeaky clean.
Holy caffeine!
We would like to thank our sponsor for this episode, ComicCole.com. Whatever your collecting needs, Comic-Cole is your comic source. Shazam! The Monster Side of Evil has been collected into a gorgeous hardcover volume. I have this, and it collects not only the 4 amazing issues, but the jacket unfolds into an oversized poster that's actually made from the original covers of the 4 issues. Behind-the-scenes materials in here, commentary from Jeff Smith, an introduction by Alex Ross. This is an introduction to these characters. It contains a reimagined origin of Billy Batson, Mary Batson, the modernized Monster Side of Evil serial. Mr. Mind and Dr. Savannah make appearances in this book. This book has a great balance of humor, action, adventure, and superhero excitement. It's all ages material, but that doesn't mean it's watered down. When you are done with this volume, you're going to want to drape a towel over your shoulder and be a superhero yourself. Regularly $29.99, only $25.49 at ComicCole.com. I can't recommend this work by Jeff Smith more. It was just such an exciting story. It's a lot of fun. If you're interested at all in the Captain Marvel family and want to see some of the background stuff, this is a great leaping on point for these characters. They're also selling the 52 The Companion trade paperback. Regularly $19.99, only $16.99 at ComicCole.com. The superpowered stars of 52 are featured in this volume, collecting the best of their solar stories. Each of these stories are from issues such as Mysterious Suspense, Gotham Central, Animal Man, Detective Comics, Metal Men, Superman the Man of Steel, Strange Adventures, Rip Hunter the Time Master, Secret Origins, JSA Savage Times. This is a great collection of background stories for these characters. If you loved 52, and that was the first time you met some of those characters, this is a great way to see some of their background. Superman, The Bottled City of Kandor, trade paperback, regularly $14.99, only $12.75 at ComicCole.com. Don't miss this Silver Age collection of the best of the Kandor stories, in which Superman and Jimmy Olsen shrink down to battle as Kandor's own costume superheroes, Nightwing and Flamebird. This volume collects stories from Action Comics, Superman, and many, many more. Don't forget to check out their consignment service. Forget the hard work of selling via eBay. Let Comic-Cole do the work for you. And they send you a check each month. Click on the Sell Your Comics link to find out more details. And as always, we want to thank Comic-Cole for their continued sponsorship of the show. They've been some great partners to us, so definitely check out their website to see if they can meet your shopping needs. We will be back next week with something.
Bye.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. Thank you to Art Lyon for joining us. I'm sure we're going to thank him at the end of the segment. Jim and I are recording this before we've actually recorded with Art. But I want to once again give a shout out to Art. Art has been, if you're a newer listener, Art Lyon, if you go back through our back catalog, has been a guest on the show multiple times, both talking about his work, sending us emails about Smallville, and joining us for Smallville segments. So he's been a regular on the show, and his agreeing to re-record this segment with us was huge. So I want to give one more time a big shout out to Art Lyon. Thank you, Art. We love you, man. And if you aren't picking up Art's work, definitely check out that Red Rain special that we're mentioning. And definitely check out, if you didn't read JLA number 11, shame on you. It's a wonderful issue. Even if you're not reading JLA, it's a very self-contained story, and it's a gorgeous piece of artwork. So you're going to want to check that out. So, cool. See you next week.
Bye.
We got 2 buys on this one. I have this, and it collects not only the 4 Amazing issues, but... don't forget to check out their No. Welcome.
Sorry. It came on afterwards. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
2 years later. Wait for it. Okay. Can I start?
Start.
Can I start?
Yes.
Can I start?
Yes.
Please feel free. Please. I do that every time now. I always say please anymore. I can't say the word please.
Hey, give peas a chance, man.
That's right. Oh, what are we going to do? Break into a Lennon song now? We're the new peaceful podcast.
Well, I was thinking or a vegetarian song. Give peas a chance. All we are saying. Okay.
All right, Jim, this is your baby, so
You ready?
go right ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you had started recording. Our next issue is our next bat.
What is our next bat?
Blah.
What is a bat anyway?
Our